Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a Sunday evening edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular once again.
Hello.
What's up, everybody? This is Russell's last night in New York for a little while. He is catching a very, very early flight to Seattle, Washington tomorrow, getting there a few days early ahead of the workers' strike back festivities. And so Russell will... there you go. Early flight, right? What time's your flight?
7:20.
Wow.
Because that was like the cheap flights were either early or like 5 o'clock at night.
Right. You don't want to go 5 o'clock at night. That's a drag.
Yeah.
That's horrible. Especially since you're going to be a little jet lagged when you get there.
Exactly.
Because it's a 3-hour difference.
So the cheapest, it was either early or it was late. So I went with the early. But yeah, man, I got to leave the house at like 3:30. Yeah. I have a TSA number. So technically I could get there later, but I don't like to risk that.
Is it direct or is there a transfer?
It's direct.
Nice. All right, so you'll be there. Yeah, you'll be there about 10:30 in the morning, Seattle time, local time.
10:40.
There you go. Yeah. Russ will not be sticking around for the Q&A tonight. We will be bringing in Tusker for the Q&A, but we will still have a Q&A.
Bringing in our cleanup hitter.
Russ has to basically wake up in the middle of the night to get to the airport. Yeah. Yep. More or less.
I mean, that's good. You know, you sleep through most of the flight that way. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. Early is better. Then when you get to Seattle, you have the whole day. You know,
Exactly.
take a few hours to adjust.
I'll probably
you got the whole
do the
day.
underground tour today if there's still places.
There you go. Well, I mean, unfortunately, you know, this is one of the worst times of year to visit Seattle weather-wise. I mean, it just rains constantly during the winter.
But one of the best times admissions-wise.
Well, yes, that is true.
Nobody's
that is
there.
definitely true.
That, like everything I looked at.
Oh, yeah.
They have tickets for.
Yeah. Well, the weather is just absolutely brutal there this time of year. Hey, we got a great crowd here. 11:52 to start things off between YouTube and Twitter. And then we got 7:08 in the Rumble chat. That's amazing. Smash that like button, everybody. Please smash that follow button on Rumble. Smash that subscribe button over on YouTube. We got Jake in the booth tonight. Round of applause for Jake. We will be actually displaying super chats tonight. I used the streamlined version of our streaming setup tonight because the weather in upstate New York is absolutely atrocious. There's a sheet of ice over everything, including power lines. So I figured I would try and, you know, proof this stream as best I can in case we have power difficulties. Make it as easy as possible for Jake and Russ to run it themselves if I should go down midway through. But knock on wood, that will not happen. All right, everybody. Well, buckle up. We got a good one for you guys tonight. We want to start out with some comedy. And who better to give us comedy than Eric Adams? The DOJ moves to drop Eric Adams' charges after 7 prosecutors resign. Axios reports the Justice Department on Friday evening moved to drop bribery and fraud charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Why it matters. At least 7 prosecutors resigned this week rather than obey a DOJ order to withdraw the indictment, with some criticizing department leadership for making the decision for political rather than legal reasons. You think that was their motivation, really? Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove reportedly pulled the DOJ's remaining public integrity prosecutors into a room and warned them that if one didn't agree to file the motion dismissing the charges within an hour, they could all be fired. 2 prosecutors ultimately did file the request with Judge Dale E. Ho asking for a dismissal of the case without prejudice, meaning the charges could later be reinstated. The request, signed by Bove, argues the indictment interferes with the mayor's ability to do his job, including with regard to immigration, which is just the most bizarre rationale to drop charges against a sitting politician who's been indicted for criminal acts. Well, if we prosecute him for committing crimes, that'll interfere with his exercise of political power. Isn't the urgency of prosecuting him the fact that the mayor of New York City is certainly, almost certainly, in this case, I feel pretty comfortable saying certainly a crook, but no. Prosecuting him would interfere with his ability to do his job and deport the migrants. They also said they find the dismissal necessary because of appearances of impropriety and risks of interference with the 2025 elections in New York City, per the letter. Judges have little leeway to deny such requests, though Ho had repeatedly denied Adams' efforts to dismiss the case, the New York Times reports. The request follows the resignations of at least 7 top prosecutors in New York City and Washington, D.C., all of whom refused to follow the DOJ's order. Acting Deputy Attorney General, wait a minute. Oh, no, that's the same. That's not the same thing. It's just, no, they wrote it in a redundant way. I thought that was my fault. It's their fault. Bad writing. Very poor writing. Horrible. Terrible.
Failing Axios.
The failing Axios has amateur writers who repeat the same phrases within an article. That's a big no-no. You don't repeat the same phrases.
Yeah, the owner of Axios was the one that gave that speech at the press club, right?
Yeah.
We're fucking journalists, damn it!
Right. Once you write Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove once, when you mention him again, you should just say Bove, because we already know
exactly.
That is what you call redundancy. Yeah. Very, very unprofessional. But anyway, we'll let it slide this one time.
That's what you call an intern wrote the article.
Exactly, yes. Bove asked prosecutors on Monday to drop Adams' charges, which Trump has cast as political persecution, much like the criminal cases against himself. Bove justified the decision in part because withdrawing the charges would make it more likely that Adams would comply with the Trump administration's immigration policies, according to 2 of the resignation letters. So 2 of the people who resigned called it out in writing, say this is clearly a way to twist Adams' arm into playing ball with Trump and giving him what he wants, full cooperation with these mass deportations. Adams then appeared in 2 joint interviews with Trump's immigration czar, Tom Homan, and promised to do just that. That's right. So here it is, just stunning and brazen out in the open. Here's Tom Homan saying, basically, we're going to keep an eye on you.
You're up early anyway. If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?" So,
I want ICE to deliver, and I want ICE to deliver. We're going to deliver for the safety of the people of this city.
Well, let's one more time. He literally just says on Fox News, we're going to be following up with him, making sure he's holding up his end.
What quid pro quo?
Yeah. If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?" So,
I want ICE to deliver, and I want ICE to deliver. We're going to deliver for the safety of the people of this city.
Well, I told you when this broke that they're going to hang this over his head. Don't forget, they asked these charges to be dismissed without prejudice, which means that the case can be reopened, which means if Adams fucks them, they could reopen the case. If Adam loses the mayoral race, they might reopen the case if he's no longer any good to them. Why wouldn't they? What, you're saying Trump isn't vindictive enough to do that?
Well, this is where they've really laid the groundwork to have a population that is completely uncritical of any action they take that is hostile towards the Justice Department. You know, I'm going through Kash Patel's book now. You know, I'm trying to get a sense of who these people are and how they think.
The one for grown-ups, not the children's book.
Not the one where he's a wizard protecting King Donald. No, the government
See, I
gangsters.
have time to read that one. I should get my hands on that.
You should read it to your kids.
I should read it to my kids. Yeah,
yeah. Get them young.
Their birthday's coming up. Get them Kash Patel action figures, Pam Bondi action figures.
They're gonna if they don't have them already, they're coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. What Patel's laying out in his book, I'm not finished with it yet, but I think I've got a pretty good handle on it at this point. Sure. I mean, the Justice Department and you know, the deep state, the establishment, they brought this on themselves by selective prosecution. Was the prosecution of Trump selective? And you're doing that while clearly treating the Biden family very differently than you're treating Donald Trump. Clearly, there is bias there. Now, I think what a lot of people who, because they've absorbed those narratives, which are true as far as they go, Patel, from what I can see in his specific book, he has his own bias. He talks about how this is always weaponized against conservatives because he thinks Democrats are the left, which they're not. How about Uhuru? Are they right wingers that they went after? They'll go after anyone that's a threat to their power. Now that aside, because there was such selective enforcement, people who don't know Adams, don't know New York City politics, don't know anything about that, are primed to just assume that this was Biden weaponizing the Justice Department against Adams. And it may very well have been, in the sense that they weaponized the Justice Department against Trump. Doesn't mean he didn't do that shit. It's just like, I never thought Trump was innocent of the charges being brought against him regarding paying off porn stars and so on. Yeah, absolutely. But is there even a doubt that if that were Bill Clinton, if that were Barack Obama, there's no way in hell that they would have brought the charges, that they would have actively covered up, as they have for the Biden family, which is clearly a criminal enterprise that you could quite possibly prosecute under a RICO statute? Sure, it's selective enforcement. But that does not mean Adams is not guilty. Adams is as crooked as they come. Adams comes out of the grand New York Tammany Hall tradition of quid pro quo, pay to play, corrupt politicians, just like the other scumbag Andrew Cuomo, who's thinking about running for his position. The things that they went after him for are not really his crimes. His crimes are classic Tammany Hall, corrupt New York politician kind of crimes. So two things can be true at the same time. Is it selective enforcement, what they're doing to Adams? Sure, probably, yeah. Is he guilty? Almost certainly. So, yeah, if it's worth it to you to, give these people their comeuppance and bloody their nose because they wouldn't prosecute him if he were in good standing with their department, okay. But understand who Eric Adams is. He's guilty. He's almost definitely guilty. Now,
yes.
whether you feel you still want to see the charges dismissed on principle, that's another question.
There were a lot of people, including a lot of Democrats, giving Biden shit about immigration. I don't really see much evidence to suggest that he was personally singled out for that reason. Like, he was far from the only politician who was sounding the alarm on that. They knew it was a political disaster.
Sure.
And so, I don't know to what extent it was
I
motivated
don't know
way.
that that's true.
Right.
But I'm saying you're seeing a lot of, they only brought that prosecution. He's innocent. No, he's not innocent.
He's definitely
not.
guilty.
You got a lot of people, they don't know who Eric Adams is. They
Eric
have no
Adams,
idea who he
in
is.
a city world famous for its concentration of total assholes, is probably the biggest total asshole in the city. In a city world famous for its assholes, he's probably the biggest one. But let's talk a little bit more.
He was the very first person I ever buttonholed on the street and got an on-the-spot question to. And I asked him why he supported solitary confinement. He gave me a whole song and dance. No, I want you next time you see me, you say, Eric, thank you for being against solitary confinement. Unfortunately, I didn't know enough to come back at him because I wasn't planning on doing this. He just happened to be in my face. I look it up at home. He changed the definition to something like punitive confinement.
Punitive isolation or something.
Punitive.
Yeah, I think
that's
was
Eric
what
Adams.
it was. Yeah,
that's
Eric
Adams.
Adams. So let's talk a little bit more about these resignations. Order to drop Adams' case prompts resignations in New York and Washington. So this was before the DOJ officially moved to drop. This was back when it was only a request, and this prompted a wave of resignations. Manhattan's U.S. attorney on Thursday resigned rather than obey an order from a top Justice Department official to drop the corruption case against New York City's mayor, Eric Adams. Then, when Justice Department officials transferred the case to the Public Integrity Section in Washington, which oversees corruption prosecutions, the two men who led that unit also resigned, according to 5 people with knowledge of the matter. Several hours later, 3 other lawyers in the unit also resigned, according to people familiar with the development. The serial resignations represent the most high-profile public opposition so far to President Trump's tightening control over the Justice Department. They were a stunning repudiation of the administration's attempt to force the dismissal of the charges against Mr. Adams. The departures of the U.S. Attorney Danielle R. Sassoon and the officials who oversaw the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section, Kevin O'Driscoll and John Keller, came in rapid succession on Thursday. Days earlier, the acting number 2 official at the Justice Department, Emil Bove III, had ordered Manhattan prosecutors to drop the case against Mr. Adams. Ms. Sassoon, in a remarkable letter addressed to Attorney General Pam Bondi, said that Mr. Bove's order to dismiss the case was, quote, inconsistent with my ability and duty to prosecute federal crimes without fear or favor and to advance good faith arguments before the courts. I have always considered it my obligation to pursue justice impartially without favor to the wealthy or those who occupy important public office or harsher treatment for the less powerful, she said. I therefore deem it necessary to the faithful discharge of my duties to raise the concerns expressed in this letter with you and to request an opportunity to meet to discuss them further. That letter was about 7 pages long. It was quite long. Ms. Sassoon, 38, made a startling accusation in her letter. She wrote that the mayor's lawyers had, quote, repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, indicating that Adams would be in a position to assist with the department's enforcement priorities only if the indictment were dismissed. A lawyer for Mr. Adams, Alex Spiro, said, the idea that there was a quid pro quo is a total lie. We offered nothing and the department asked nothing of us. Now, remember that video we just showed you a few minutes back and ask yourself if that makes sense. We were asked if the case had any bearing on national security and immigration enforcement, and we truthfully answered it did, he added. Now, you talk about the lady doth protesting too much. Here's Eric Adams in that same Fox interview with Holman by his side saying, quid pro quo? Hey, if my lawyer asked for a quid pro quo, that would be a crime. That would be really stupid, wouldn't it? So this can't possibly be a quid pro quo.
Mayor, let's talk a little bit about, you've been in the news all week.
Yes.
The Department of Justice dropped the criminal corruption charges against you. The U.S. attorney here in New York City, the Southern District, she quit yesterday, the acting U.S. attorney. And so did 5 members of the Department of Justice because they felt like being forced by the Department of Justice to drop the corruption charges was inappropriate and they should not have asked. And what she said was, she said, you offered to help with the migration problem and the immigration agenda in exchange for the case being dropped.
Think about that. Think about that. Think about my attorney, Alex Spiro, one of the top trial attorneys in the country. Imagine him going inside saying that the only way Mayor Adams is going to assist in immigration, which I was calling for since 2022, is if you drop the charges. That's quid pro quo. That's a crime. It took her 3 weeks to report in front of her a criminal action. Come on, this is silly.
Come on, this is silly. This is like OJ saying, "Imagine I rolled up on my wife and stabbed her." Now that would be a crime. That's silly. Come on, of course I didn't do that.
That was like Jamal Bowman that they literally had on video pulling the fire.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Now why would I do that?
Why would I do that?
Why would I do that? Well, you did. You did. Now, of course, he's playing some word games here because, as we saw in the last slide, of course, the lawyer didn't admit to saying, "Hey, let's do a quid pro quo." The lawyer said, "No, of course, this has nothing to do with a quid pro quo." But it's so obvious that that's what that was.
Literally,
like,
Tom Homan said
that would be silly. Why would I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Homan is such a meathead. He confessed on camera.
Yeah.
That's a confession. He confessed.
Yeah. Here, let's show it one more time. It's short. We'll play that one more time.
If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?" So,
I want ICE to deliver, and I want ICE to deliver. We're going to deliver for the safety of the people of this city.
And it looks like he
doesn't get any more clear than that.
Nope. No, it does not, and it looks like he is delivering just fine. So here's the NYPD out in full force at a recent anti-ICE protest. You look at the volume of police officers at this protest, it was insane. It was a relatively small protest. And one tweet actually pointed that out. Protesters marching to abolish ICE are currently outnumbered by NYPD in downtown Manhattan. 3 arrests so far, that's their estimate, all for being on the roadway. The small protest, less than a block long, is being flanked by 10-plus police vans and hordes of NYPD on foot, including SRG. Here's some video for this. Looks like Eric Adams holding up his end of the bargain so far, I gotta say. He's got the cops on the beats.
Fellas, you got a new mission. You got to keep me out of jail.
Right, you got to keep me out of jail. Exactly. So look, whatever you think of immigration and ICE and mass deportations and Trump, it's a fact that the vast majority of New Yorkers voted against Trump. Now, it was closer than it usually is. Trump made a lot of gains in the big cities this year. But it's still true that a vast majority of New York City residents voted against Trump. And now, because their mayor is a criminal who's being basically extorted by Donald Trump, be my puppet or the charges are back on and you're going to jail. Now a city that voted...
And we reserve the right to do that at any time.
Right, because they're asked for it to be dismissed without prejudice, which means they could put the heat back on him anytime if he's not holding up his end of the bargain, as Tom Homan said. So now this city that votes overwhelmingly against Donald Trump is stuck with a Trump puppet as a mayor because he's a criminal who is now being extorted with jail time by Donald Trump. Like, tell me that is not just brazen, naked corruption, just absolutely in your face on TV, on Fox News, right there.
I must say, and I say this not lightly because I live here, if ever there was a town full of hillbot shitlibs who brought this on themselves and deserve everything they get, it's New York.
Well, that's what I said, man. New York City. I think I said that the last time we covered this. I said there's once again another win for the New York for Democratic primary voters. Right? They could have had any mayor they wanted. It didn't have to be this guy. They picked this guy.
A Republican, a 20-year cop. He was on the force for 20 years. He was a Republican. He only flipped so that he could win the mayoralty in New York because it's almost impossible. Usually.
Right. And Democratic voters are so stupid They fell for his bullshit hook, line, and sinker, and now they're stuck with basically a Trump proxy as mayor in an overwhelmingly liberal city, because that's exactly what he is and going to be now. Don't forget, the other element of this is there's an election this year, and Trump obviously wants him to win because he's a compromised mayor who Trump can control. A mayor who's less compromised is less controllable, and they're likely to be Democratic, who might give him some more pushback. So they don't want a problem mayor in the biggest city in the country. They want a mayor who they can control, and now they have that.
I don't know how much they're not going to be able to control him. You know, there's so much news right now. We just can't cover everything. You know, they're suing. The Justice Department is suing Hochul personally. They're not suing Adams. They left him off the list. They're suing the head of the DMV. I don't even remember the guy's name. And who else? There's one other who's being sued in that lawsuit, like a prominent political figure, for giving. There's three of them for giving driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. So Andrew Cuomo, if I had to guess, if he does decide to run, his calculus is he was such a resistance figure. #resistance during COVID, and that New Yorkers are going to be so horrified that essentially they have a MAGA mayor that they might turn to him to be the resistance. You know, and he's good at doing that Trump bait bullshit for them.
I think Andrew Cuomo is going to win. I think he's going to be the next mayor.
He could be.
I do.
He could be.
Hey, folks, listen. I know he's a corrupt asshole, but you have to understand those stories about his mother's meatballs. A good gravy goes a long way in New York
Prop
City. That's
comedy, man. We love prop comedy. The giant Q-tip, forget about it.
Also, you know, Sunday gravy. A good gravy goes a long way in New York City.
Good Sunday gravy,
yeah. His mother makes a good sauce. She makes a very good sauce, as Henry Hill would say. A little too many onions, I think, but it was still a very good sauce.
It was still a very good sauce. By the time we get to November, people, particularly in the liberal enclaves, are going to be pretty over Trump. Like
he's going to win.
If time, you have to remember, man. This is part of why Adams won. Adams ran as tough on crime. New York gave the country Rudy Giuliani. New York gave the country Michael Bloomberg as a politician, as a political figure. New York is very right wing. It is the neoliberal shithole. It is the whole neoliberal ideal of extremely right-wing attitudes about the underclass, about poverty, about crime, with absolutely over-the-top views on culture war issues. Just completely as far as you can go in that direction. How dare they stop the drag brunch at the nursery school? That is the beginning and end of their pretenses at leftism. That is the beginning and end of it. So, but look, people like this, these rich fucks who would have voted for the Levi heir there, you know.
Well, no,
these people do not like the immigration, and they were concerned about the crime. So what? You think all those people don't like ICE dragging these people out of the city? That would be a misreading of the New York electorate to think that. They won't like the aesthetics, just like they don't like Trump's aesthetics. They won't like the aesthetics of Eric Adams being so clearly a puppet of Donald Trump.
Right.
The basic policy of ICE dragging immigrants out of New York, if you think the voting public in New York is made up of the kind of people who actually don't like that, rather than look how small that protest was. Right? And a lot of people didn't come out for that. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think they won't like the image of it more than they dislike the reality of it.
I mean, I think absent an infusion of see, like, I don't even know why the Republicans are bothering to run anybody. You have Curtis Lee was saying he's going to run. The Republicans are going to have to back Adams if they want to, you know, if they want to have their way with the mayor of New York. Like, it's a no-brainer. Like, the MAGA and the Trump people just have to back Eric Adams. They can't take a chance on a Republican who's likely to lose. And Cuomo, yes, I know what everybody's opinions are about Andrew Cuomo. The name has a lot of cachet in New York. And for the same reason that Goldman won that congressional primary, Cuomo is likely to win on the Democratic side. He's tough. He's got the experience. He could take on Trump. That is going to be the dominant sentiment among Democratic primary voters. Don't forget, they're running in a primary. It's a primary. It's a primary. So you're dealing with the Democratic base is going to be who determines who advances to the general election. In a general election, Cuomo versus Adams, yeah, maybe Adams has a shot. In a Democratic primary where you're dealing with the most committed Democrats and liberals and Trump-deranged people, I think Cuomo has a very good chance to win.
That's a point. That's a point. Also, dude, I went into the supermarket yesterday. Fucking eggs in Harlem were $11.25 a dozen.
For how many?
A dozen.
A dozen? Wow.
$11.25.
Holy shit. Wow, wow.
Like they exploded in the last week or two because of the bird flu.
Yeah. Wow. Got to do something about that, Donald. Don't want those eggs to get out of control. Yep. All right, folks. So we're going to move on right now. Hey, if you have a musical project or a book or an arts project or a small business that you would like to promote, you can get in touch with us by going to dudissidents.com/sponsors. We would love to partner with you to promote your stuff. We are now going to feature a musical project from a bard and a guitar. So Dogmatics is the name of the album. It's a musical retelling of the Jonah fable in a modern-day setting. This satire album follows a bard and a guitar tasked by God to help the people of a city whose politics he can't stand. Very apropos of that first segment that we just did. Featuring reinterpretations of All the Girls Go Crazy, No Irish Need Apply, and Love Me, I'm a Liberal. Find it on most music streaming platforms by searching for Dogmatics by a bard and a guitar. So that is, like I said, on most of the streaming platforms. You can also find it very easily by going to dudissidents.com/bard. That's our own hyperlink made by our friend Jake. dudissidents.com/bard to support our dissident arts community. All righty.
I believe we are at the 1999 sound drop.
Yes, we are. Beautiful. Great crowd in here tonight. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Let's go to some super chats and Rumble rants. Michael Castillo, good evening, gentlemen. Russell, my friend of 22 years, and his wife will be joining me on the 14th of March for your tour.
Nice. I saw you bought tickets. Looking forward to it, man.
Awesome. I wanted to ask the two of you, which are your favorite delis in New York City? What do you think of Katz, the original deli? I love Katz. That's the best one.
Right.
Like, if you want the pastrami sandwich, that's really the best one.
Okay, so if you want the pastrami sandwich, yes, Katz's cannot be beat of any place I've ever been, actually. That place Langer's in L.A. that Jimmy took me, actually, their pastrami was good. It was actually good.
There's a great one up in Quebec, oddly enough.
Is there really?
Yeah, Schwartz's or something like that, yeah.
Really? But, yeah, Katz's is the best. If you want to have, like, the total, like, Jew food experience, like you want to do the chopped liver, the chicken in the pot, the cholent, Second Avenue Deli can't be beat for that.
All right. There you go. Everyone knows Hodges on First Avenue is the best. CEB Applejack 59. Thank you.
Not for that kind of deli.
Killer Itten just started an OnlyFans page. I'm going by Progressive Doge Daddy. I'll give you dirtbags first dibs on sponsoring me with free advertising. Sorry about the dirtbags thing. Thank you, Killer Itten. Appreciate that. Furrow Screen says, oh, no, I'm too ill to watch the stream, and I'll miss Tusker. Gutted. Just wanted to ask, was it one of you guys who asked Bernie a question and he said, who paid you? No, I've never asked Bernie a question about anything in person. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Chicken soup.
Honestly, man, when I went and covered the Bowman thing, that was my chance to do an intervention on Bernie. But if I'm attending something with my press badge, my rule is kind of don't do that. It's one or the other because I don't want to lose the press badge.
Right.
I'm afraid they'll take it away if I do something like that when I'm working.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. That could be a little bit dangerous long term. Yeah, some people in the chat. Tusker is going to be on. Yes, Tusker is joining for the Q&A. Russ has an early flight tomorrow. He's got to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and so Tusker is going to join me for the Q&A after the show. All right, let's move on to segment number 2. Mr. Vance goes to Germany.
Where he belongs.
Yeah.
So Vance gave a barn buster of a speech. Now, there are a lot of parts to it. We're just going to focus in on the part that really got the most attention. It got Catman, a.k.a. Charlie Kirk, very excited. It was the free speech portion. So we'll listen to that. We'll listen to about a 3-minute section of that, and then we will comment.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Okay, so when they tried to refute what he said, they really made it worse. You had the German chancellor literally went on stage at the Munich conference and said straight out, essentially, that censorship of hate speech is our values. That's defending our values. You had Scotland in accusation as a confession manner, refuted what he's saying. No, that wouldn't apply if you're in your home, only if you're in your yard. Okay. All right. So yes, hey, we have reported on this kind of thing over the years. In fact, this is a video of an elderly man being arrested in England for sharing a meme.
The British Hampshire police would realise how ridiculous this is. It is. Good. I'm glad to come to this.
What did it need to come to?
Tell us why you escalated it to this level, because I don't understand. I posted something that he posted. You come to arrest me. You don't arrest him. Why has it come to this? Why am I in cuffs? Because of something he shared, then I shared.
Because someone has been caused, obviously, anxiety based upon your social media page.
That's not his.
Why you've been arrested.
You've owned the libs in the third degree. I'm afraid subtweeting is no excuse. Just because you didn't tag the target of the tweet, it was clear who you were talking about. Subtweeting is not an excuse, sir. Now get in the car.
Your neighbor, Mrs. Marbley, just likes to put on her lipstick in that manner. It isn't your business to mock her publicly for it, sir. Yeah. So, hey, we have reported on this. There was a terrible case where an autistic girl got literally dragged out of her house by the police for saying about a police officer, as autistic people will. Sometimes they throw out Nazi salutes. Sometimes they say she's a lesbian. You just never know. And her grandmother was a lesbian. There was no prejudicial intention. And even though her mother was
like, hey, she looks like a lesbian like my grandmother.
Right. Oh, she's a lesbian. Right. So the mother was begging them, trying to explain she's autistic. Her gran is a lesbian. It's fine. She didn't mean it like that. And just the arrogance of these people is part of the cause of the right-wing backlash that you're seeing in America and throughout Europe, and the way that they responded to it. If anyone is concerned about the implications of this right-wing movement becoming the dominant political force in the West, their response will not have done anything to give you the idea that this is not going to continue to take over one government after another, and they have well earned that. But you might notice, as surprisingly a lot of journalists that I follow who cover a lot of speech cases have even been speaking out for Palestine, a lot of people seem not to notice that he very exclusively focused on these kinds of culture war issues, the Christian praying. I bet a lot of people in our audience noticed what he didn't talk about when he talked about freedom of speech, at a later point in the speech, he talks about the freedom of journalism, the freedom of political parties to express speech that you consider hate speech. He went on really, I mean, that was probably the bulk of the speech, talking about the freedom to politically organize, even what people consider hateful, even if you consider it fascist, you should be able to organize. But
brand burning. He mentioned that explicitly. Yeah.
Right. But interestingly, he talked about several countries where much more egregious cases of violation of free speech and the rights of journalists have been committed than what we saw with that poor old man in his driveway, as heinous as that is. So you guys probably know UK journalist Richard Medhurst detained at Heathrow under the Terrorism Act. So this is a little bit of Richard explaining what happened.
Is Richard Thomas Medhurst. I'm an internationally accredited journalist from the United Kingdom. On Thursday, as I landed in London Heathrow Airport, I was immediately escorted off the plane by 6 police officers who were waiting for me at the entrance of the aircraft. They arrested me, not detained, they arrested me under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act of 2000 and accused me of allegedly, quote, expressing an opinion or belief that is supportive of a prescribed organization, unquote, but wouldn't explain what this meant. One officer took my bags, and when I asked why he was still back in the aircraft, I was told, look, mate, you can get nicked right here in front of everyone, or in there, your choice. So I was taken to an adjacent room, patted down, my phone confiscated. I was not allowed to inform my family. Despite being calm and cooperative, I was handcuffed with something that placed my shoulders in an awkward position and my wrists on top of rather than next to each other. The handcuffs were extremely tight. Despite the police loosening them, they left marks on me for 2 days. The police took me down onto the runway, put me in a police van, essentially a mobile cage, and informed me that everything was being recorded. The van was cramped. I had to struggle the entire time to keep my balance and try not to fall over as we drove to the police station.
Okay. So that's a little strange that he's talking about England specifically. He talks about a Christian who was praying outside of an abortion center. Does not mention what I would argue is a much more serious and egregious violation of the standards of freedom of speech and certainly of freedom of the press. But maybe it's just because it was only Richard Medhurst. Oh, no. Reporter Sarah Wilkinson, arrested by UK government for opposition to Gaza genocide. A man whose T-shirts I own in abundance had a few things to say about this. Let's see what Roger said.
So, 12 cops, the old Bill, come round to the house and arrest you. Sarah Wilkinson, I'm talking about now. They arrest you for standing up for human rights, campaigning against genocide. Okay. We know that these are policies that Keir Starmer doesn't agree with and Rishi Sunak didn't agree with. But you cannot get the old Bill to come round and arrest people who have hearts and minds and have made up their own mind what they think about foreign policy. This is wrong. If you allow this to stand, the arrest of Sarah Wilkinson and the persecution of my friend Craig Murray, among others, then you have absolutely accepted that England is now a fascist state. 1984 has arrived and is alive and well in the United Kingdom over my dead body.
Now, this should carry some weight with Vance, because as anybody who's ever read the Hillbilly Elegy knows, he's very into the Dark Side of the Moon album. So I don't know why he didn't mention this case. Maybe he didn't catch that particular video. But it's not just England. Here we see in Switzerland, very recently, Ali Ubanima. How do you say his name properly?
Some people say, I mean, I heard Aaron Mate say Abunima, but then Blakely said Abunima. So I'm not sure.
All right. So
I said Abunima.
So let's just read this a little bit. The Palestinian-American journalist Ali Abunima was freed from detention Monday evening and deported from Switzerland after a 3-day ordeal that rights groups and UN experts blasted as a major attack on free speech. So our friend Blakely did a little video about this. We'll play a little bit of that.
Breaking news in the latest fascist roundup of journalists in Europe. Europe really not beating those allegations and recovering from World War II here. So the authorities in Switzerland, just arrested Ali Abunima, who is a journalist and the executive director of the Electronic Intifada. Was arrested by Swiss police ahead of a speaking event in Zurich. Sorry if I messed that up. On Saturday afternoon. He is currently being detained and has had access to legal counsel. The arrest came days after Abunima arrived in Zurich for the speaking event. When he arrived in Zurich airport on Friday, Abunima was questioned by police for an hour before being allowed to enter the country. Abunima's arrest appears to be part of a growing backlash from Western governments against the expressions of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Last year, several activists and journalists in Britain were arrested, raided, or charged using counter-terror powers. These include Asa Winstanley, an associate editor for the Electronic Intifada, whose home was raided and his computers and phones seized. Winstanley has not been charged with any crime.
Okay. And then not long after that, I think just about 10 days after that, less than 2 weeks, Max Blumenthal here says less than 2 weeks after Zurich police arrested Ali Abunima for planning to give a lecture on Gaza, Austrian state security escalate repression of Palestine solidarity by raiding and arresting journalist Richard Medhurst, who or what are they really protecting? So Medhurst gets arrested again, only this time in Austria, first time in the UK. Now, Vance not only overlooked all of these, I would argue, grossly more egregious violations of free speech, freedom of the press, freedom of political organizing. He's talking in Germany. He overlooked this every place else, including in the country that he's in. Let's take a look at how they honor free speech in Germany itself. This is a child with a Palestinian flag. It's like the only people who have never seen a Nazi film are Germans.
Yeah.
Halt! Halt! It's a child. It's a little kid.
With a flag.
Schnell! Schnell! Get on the train! Enough of your nonsense!
Look at that. Booking a kid. Putting a kid in the back of a police van for waving a flag.
Putting a kid in the back of a van for waving a chasing him down, a whole squad.
A whole squad of them.
Whole squad. Somehow, not a word of any of that made it into Vance's speech, even though he spent, I would say, at least half his speech specifically talking about repression of journalism, speech, and political organizing in Europe. At least half his speech, probably more, probably about 3/4 of his speech was spent on that. Here in November, German police detain 111 people during pro-Palestine protest. Again, and this was a week ago. This was, I think it was February 5th, and the event was February 15th, the Munich conference at which Vance spoke. So this was 1 week before. He spoke right at the opening about the tragic terrorist attack of the migrant, because that served a certain narrative. But this event, which happened right around the same time, this he said nothing about. They made chanting in Arabic illegal.
Only German and English allowed to protest. So you're not allowed to speak Arabic in public in Germany.
We do not need that guttural language here! That is not the tongue of the Übermensch!
Wir haben jetzt die Möglichkeit, den ehemaligen Versammlungsort zu tun Sie dies nicht. Wird die Polizei gegen Sie vorgehen, den Bereich umräumen, Sie, wenn nötig, wegtragen, Ihre Identität feststellen.
Okay, all right. So we've taken a little tour around Europe of some of the, I would argue, and I think most reasonable people would agree, much more egregious offenses against freedom of speech than a guy who got arrested praying outside an abortion clinic. Not that I agree with that. I think that's terrible. That shouldn't happen. But I would argue Richard Medhurst getting arrested in 2 different countries for the crime of committing journalism is a much more clear and present danger to the values that Vance is claiming that he cares about. I'm surprised that so many very high-profile journalists who are often accused of having become right-wing MAGA Trump apologists missed that point. So many of them missed that point and are only talking about how he went after the Digital Services Act, which many reporters have done a good job exposing. It's terrible. We've done segments about that ourselves. It's just amazing to me that so many people who claim to really care about this subject did nothing but kind of aid and abet Vance's attempt to focus the conversation on speech on relatively trivial matters, frankly, cultural matters. Not that, again, we don't agree with that. We've done whole segments about the Digital Services Act and its implication. But I think we would all agree that the things you just saw are more egregious than anything that Vance talked about in that speech. And, you know, when you're talking about high-quality journalists, they know that. They know that. They certainly know about it, especially if you're a journalist. You'd want to take the opportunity, say you were on like Fox. You'd probably want to say something about Richard Medhurst or Kathy Wilkerson. You probably wouldn't just want to play along. But surprisingly, some people are doing that. Now, is it just in Europe that Vance is overlooking these assaults on speech and freedom of expression? No. Apparently, he's ignoring it in his own house. He's ignoring it in his own administration. Fire, which has kind of taken the place of the ACLU in a lot of areas, although once in a while ACLU will still step up on things like this.
I mean, now that Trump is president, they're more likely.
Now that Trump's president, exactly. Trump's threat to deport anti-Israel protesters is an attack on free speech. The president's executive order on anti-Semitism would make universities monitor students' constitutionally protected speech. Oh, that's right in his own administration. The president gave an executive order suppressing protesters. On Wednesday, Trump signed an executive order on anti-Semitism that directs leaders of agencies, including the Secretary of Homeland Security, to familiarize universities with grounds for inadmissibility for foreign nationals, quote, so that such institutions may monitor for and report activities by alien students and staff relevant to those grounds. Those reports will then lead to investigations and, if warranted, actions to remove such aliens, unquote. This development should worry all Americans, regardless of their position on the Israel-Hamas war. The order implies that universities should be monitoring and reporting students for scrutiny by immigration officials, including for speech that is protected by the First Amendment. It follows last week's executive order threatening denial of entry to foreign nationals or even deportation of those currently in the country who espouse hateful ideology. You understand, even if you're here on a foreign visa, you have First Amendment protections. You cannot legally be retaliated against for exercising the rights that all people in the country have. If you're in the country, you have those rights. However, didn't take much time for some of these Zionist fanatics at Columbia University to organize a WhatsApp group to start snitching on people and trying to get them deported for protesting or for expressing pro-Palestine views. Now, you might remember back in May, the House passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, and this was not just Republicans. That was a 320 to 91 vote. So the bulk of the Democrats voted for it. Now, Schumer did not bring it up for a vote in the Senate, but it's been reintroduced. So what does it say? Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. IHRA's working definition reads, rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. The definition includes, quote, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g., by claiming that the state of Israel is a racist state, and drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Well, they're going to deport us, Keaton.
Yeah, exactly.
If universities fail to take punitive actions towards students who violate the definition, the Education Department could revoke federal research grants and other funding per Title VI of the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, which prohibits the discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs that receive federal financial assistance. Proponents say the legislation would help crack down on anti-Semitism on campuses, while opponents say the definition is too broad and could chill free speech. Oh, do you think? So this did not get through the Senate, but it was just reintroduced on February 5th. Bipartisan House group reintroduces Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Quote, there is no reason why this should not be the law of the land, said Representative Josh Gottheimer, a lead sponsor of the bill. It's time that everyone understood and there is no confusion what anti-Semitism is. So, you know, J.D. Vance is very concerned about free speech in Europe, although only a certain kind of free speech. He should maybe take a look at what's happening to free speech in America. This is very typical of this entire movement, and this is why I don't have a lot of patience for people who are going to gas it up and ignore the obvious. You don't have to be like a crackerjack detective to see what they're doing. They are focusing. It's the bizarro world version of the libs. The libs will focus all your attention in one direction in order to obscure what they don't want you to look at. Same thing here. They're going to focus you on the outrage of the old man in the driveway being arrested for a meme, and they're not going to say a word about Richard Medhurst. Now, I can understand a lot of people who are MAGA, who are not spending all of their time digging into things like this within their media ecosystem. They're not even hearing about people like Kathy Wilkerson or Richard Medhurst, so you're just going to hear that and say, winning, yeah, I'm getting tired of winning. If you know better than that, you really have no business helping them to create this false narrative that they're bringing back freedom of speech. They're not bringing back freedom of speech. They're bringing back the kind of speech that they like that was being suppressed by the liberal class, while tripling and quadrupling down on the kind of free speech that so many of us, including a lot of people who are bending the knee now to this narrative, have been screaming about for a year and a half.
Yeah, they are not for free speech. J.D. Vance does not support free speech. If he did support free speech, he would have mentioned Medhurst. He would have mentioned Wilkinson. Medhurst, a Christian, by the way. One thing he was keen to point out. He says, I'm a British Christian. He would have mentioned Wilkinson. He would have mentioned Ali from the Electronic Intifada. The fact that you have a blind spot when it comes to certain kinds of speech means you do not support free speech.
Right.
The whole point of supporting free speech is that there are no blind spots. You can't say, well, he supports free speech generally, but he has a blind spot when it comes to the, Israel, Gaza. Well, if you have a blind spot, then you don't support free speech at all. You don't support it at all. So J.D. Vance does not support free speech at all. At all. He deserves no credit whatsoever. They don't want free speech. What they want is to reclaim the culture for Christianity because they think that the wokesters have usurped traditional values. And they want to reclaim, the society for Christian values. That is what they want to do. It has absolutely nothing, fuck all, to do with freedom of speech. And everybody with a brain in their head knows that. It's completely obvious.
Right.
It's the most obvious thing in the world.
Well, and you also have to only focus on instances of people with conservative views and conservative values having their speech suppressed to maintain the fiction that people like Kash Patel peddle, that this is all weaponized against the right. When, if you look at what's happened to pro-Palestine protesters, you could argue it is weaponized in a much more serious and damaging way against people who are actually on the left, not liberals, the left.
Right, exactly. And look at what happened here to the African people's, the African Socialist People's Party. And look at what happened with O'Malley. Look what happened with them. Now Tucker Carlson spoke out for them.
He did,
but you didn't have any prominent political figures speak out for them from either party. Nobody, literally nobody. Right. And so, it's very, very obvious that they only care about free speech in one direction, which means they don't care about it at all. And they don't deserve credit for this. They don't deserve J.D. Vance has nothing to say about the brutal crackdown on pro-Palestine speech, but we can give him credit for that. No, you can't. The whole point of free speech is that if it doesn't apply to everyone, there's no point applying it to anyone. That it's not freedom of speech. So no, you don't deserve credit. No, this was not a good speech. It was a bullshit speech by a bullshit fucking throw pillow fucking scumbag who only believes in free speech one way, which means you don't believe in it at all.
Well, we saw that on October 8th, 2023,
of course.
Right? All of a sudden, all the douchebag dialogue, intellectual, dark web, grifting scumbags All of a sudden, they weren't for free speech anymore.
Right.
All of a sudden, they wanted to see the student protesters locked up. All of a sudden, they were woke. They're Islamists. They're being converted to Islam. It's so absurd. Some of the claims that were made to justify the hypocrisy of it.
Right.
No, we believe in freedom of speech, but they're being indoctrinated into Islam. So.
Right. He goes as far as to defend the guy who burned the Quran. Now, look, I think you should be able to burn a religious text. I think you should be able to burn a flag. Like, I'm a free speech absolutist in that way. Like, I don't think anybody should be prosecuted for that. But you could make a case that's like closer to the line of intimidation or something like that. Like, I wouldn't make that case, but I'm saying you could make a case that is closer to the line, certainly way closer to the line than a child waving a pro-Palestine flag. Like, what is more incendiary, burning a Quran or a child waving a pro-Palestine flag? Well, the answer in J.D. Vance's mind is the latter, because the latter offends his sensibilities, because he cares nothing about free speech, nothing at all.
Right. And
sick of hearing about this fucking speech. People tweeting it out like it's a Sermon on the Mount.
I mean, this is something that eventually I will probably, not eventually, probably before too long, I'm going to feel like I just have to do a video essay about this and let the chips fall where they may. It is tragic how many of our heroes are just falling on their knees and knob-gobbling this administration. It is really tragic. It's really tragic.
It's not only is it tragic, it's actually quite worrying, because, if there is actually going to be like any resistance to this, you would think it would be from this crop of people.
That's right. Especially people who have really made their careers on advocating for freedom of the press and freedom of speech. How on earth do you go and gas up a speech where J.D. Vance goes to Europe and only complains about niche identitarian persecutions of speech while completely ignoring the persecution of journalists? If you are a journalist and a journalist who has really built your reputation on fighting for freedom of speech and freedom of journalism, how do you aid and abet this? I mean, the kindest interpretation is it's tough being on the outside looking in. It wears people down. That's an old story. And if you feel it's a lot better to feel like you're winning, right? Like you're getting some control. It's particularly if you start to feel like you're getting some kind of access, you're getting a seat at the table. And the price for that seat at the table is, if you sit down and you look at what the Daily Wire is reporting, and you look at what you're reporting, and you're reporting the same thing, same way, same perspective, same blind spot, well, what did you win? You didn't beat the enemy, you became the enemy.
Yep. Agreed. All right, let's take some Rumble rants and super chats here. Kenman, yesterday I adopted a Safaka lemur. I can't tame the bastard, and he has now occupied my house. Well, you have to be careful with those Safaka lemurs. They're sideways bipedal.
They're sideways motherfucker.
Those sideways bipedal.
You gotta lock the bathroom. Don't dive right in the toilet.
Biden, thanks for the donation. Your Jose Vega documentary was superb, put together as good as any. Well, thank you, my friend. My $1 should draw enough water to recommend you do another one. Shama would have been a good subject. She would be a great subject, actually. Our plan is to do one on Omali, Yeshitela, and the African People's Socialist Party this summer. That is the plan for the next one. But yeah, no, Shama would be a great subject. Absolutely. Absolutely.
She would be.
All right, let's see. People who sold and crashed military stocks last week must not read the same orange tea leaves or Cheeto tarot cards as you guys, nor the party, nor have the privy of J.D. Vance's book club. Thank you. Okay. Siddhartha Vicious, Mama Cuomo's got good sauce. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Nina Kant, 60 eggs at Sam's Club, Kansas City, $18.91 was $20 yesterday. That's some bullshit in New York. Well, groceries are always a little more expensive in New York, but yeah, to $19 for 60 eggs at Sam's Club, that's a lot too. Okay, got that one there. Beautiful. All right, what do we got here? Okay, sorry, we got some more here. Got that one already. Luis de la Cruz, so good to catch you guys live. You're loved and appreciated in San Antonio. Keep calling balls and strikes. Thank you, Luis. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate that. Janice Anderson, been posting on other leftist streamers about your offer of letting them simulcast your coverage, the Worker Strike Back Organizing Conference. Thank you, Janice. Yeah, we're finalizing our lineup.
Yeah, we're working on it.
This week, we are working on it. We got some people on board here. So far, we got, obviously, RBN and Hardlands are going to do it. Generational Change is going to do it. And I think Uhuru is going to do it on their Burning Spear channel. And so we got, 5, including us now, and we're hoping to get some more. So, but thank you for that. We have some some messages out to some other people.
We just got another person. We'll talk about it later.
Oh, we did? Oh, okay, great. Awesome. All right. Fat, not so fat. Regarding California fires, they should seed clouds to induce rain to reduce the fire risk. We've been messing with weather since Vietnam. Landrew, thanks for $100. Let's hear it for Landrew. Cowbell, sound drop for Landrew. Appreciate that very much. I have to say this while I can. Free Palestine. Workers strike back.
Seriously.
Yes,
Seriously.
You're not kidding, my friend. Do we have the sound drop for Landrew? Where's that sound?
Oh,
drop
yeah.
at?
Whoops, sorry. You doing it or am I doing it?
Whoever finds it first.
I'm
will do
almost
it.
there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just do your thing. I got it.
Okay.
I am Landrew. Landrew is dead.
Thank you, Landrew. Appreciate that very, very much. Hillary Hinton. Oops, sorry. Hillary Hinton. Finkelstein as Quentin Jaws. Then you hear that terrible high-pitched scream and the ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and rip you to pieces. Thank you, Hillary Hinton. Appreciate that very much. Okay, let's move on to segment number 3. All right, folks. Well, here's something. Make of it what we will here. I think this is good news, obviously. Better have this on the record than not. There's no reason for us to build brand new nuclear weapons, says Donald Trump. We already have so many you could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. So here's Trump gesturing towards denuclearization as an agenda item now in his second term.
Global defense spending, you, China,
Well, I'd like to have that as soon as things settle down. I'm going to have that conference primarily with China and Russia because those are the two that really are out there. And we're going to have them spend a lot less money, and we're going to spend a lot less money. And I know they're going to do it. They agreed to it. We were talking about denuclearizing, and President Putin and I agreed that we were going to do it in a very big way. There's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many you could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. And here we are building new nuclear weapons, and they're building nuclear weapons, and China's building new nuclear weapons, and China's trying to catch up because, they're very substantially behind, but within 5 or 6 years, they'll be even. And we're all spending a lot of money that we could be spending on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. Hopefully, there'll never be a time when we need those weapons. If there's ever a time when we need nuclear weapons, like the kind of weapons that we're building and that Russia has and that China has to a lesser extent, but will have, that's going to be a very sad day. That's going to be probably oblivion.
Certainly would be. Antiwar.com, Dave DeCamp, the great Dave DeCamp. Check out antiwar.com, of course. Fantastic source. Trump, military spending could be cut in half, and there's no reason to build new nuclear weapons. The president said he wants to have a global conference with Russia and China to discuss cutting military spending. President Trump told reporters on Thursday that he believes U.S. military spending could eventually be cut in half, and that he wants to pursue the idea as part of an agreement with Russia and China. He also said there was no reason to build new nuclear weapons. Yeah, Doge should have gotten on that, actually. That was an oversight on their part so far. The U.S. spends significantly more on its military.
I heard you can buy them with Bitcoin now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. The U.S. spends significantly more on its military than Russia and China combined. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, in 2023, the U.S. accounted for 37% of global military spending. That's right, one country, 37% of global military spending. China came in second, but was still far behind, accounting for 12% of military spending. And Russia was in third at 4.5%. That's how that looks graphically. There's the United States. That's sourced from the report that he was referencing. 37% of global spending on the military. Trump has previously claimed that he was pursuing denuclearization with Russia and China in his first term in office, but the U.S. also withdrew from key arms control treaties during that time. Russia recently said the outlook was not good for the state of U.S. arms control, as the last nuclear arms control treaty between the two powers is due to expire in February of 2026, and there's currently no replacement. But Trump's talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the Ukraine war could lead to arms control negotiations. On the other hand, Trump also recently signed an executive order to build a major new missile defense system to cover the U.S. and its military bases abroad, which could lead to a new arms race and will come with a huge price tag. Republicans in Congress are also looking to increase military spending by at least $100 billion. Yes, that's in the budget plan that just cleared the budget committee a couple days ago. So this is the first thing that Dave links to in that article. U.S. withdraws from Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. This was, of course, August of 2019 during Trump's first term. The United States has officially withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, commonly referred to as the INF, an agreement with the Russian Federation that limited the types of weapons the nations involved could pursue. Quote, Russia has failed to comply with its obligations under the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and as such, the United States has withdrawn from the INF Treaty effective today, August 2nd, 2019. Defense Secretary Dr. Mark T. Esper said in a statement today, this withdrawal is a direct result of Russia's sustained and repeated violations of the treaty over many years and multiple presidential administrations. The agreement, signed in December 1987 by U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev, limited both nations from fielding both short-range and intermediate-range land-based ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and missile launchers that could be used to house either nuclear or conventional payloads. You also have here, just a couple of weeks ago, Russia may drop caps on nuclear arms if U.S. pushes ahead with its missile defense effort. So Russia's Foreign Ministry Special Ambassador Grigory Mashkov explained that the further development of the U.S. global missile defense system, which is the American Iron Dome, which Trump talked about, puts an end to the prospects of strategic offensive arms reduction and preservation of strategic stability on the previous terms. So there you would see reason why this might not happen. And of course, in the short term, the House budget resolution includes $100 billion defense funding boost. So the new budget plan that just cleared committee calls for $100 billion extra dollars to the DoD. This same budget plan requires $2 trillion in mandatory spending cuts, which are the entitlement spending cuts. $2 trillion worth of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid cuts. That's the current budget plan, is to slash and burn the social safety net while increasing funding for the Department of Defense. So, you know, this speech that he gave here sounds well and good. If people got in the streets and demanded this, I would, of course, back that. Obviously, it's nice to be able to look to the possibility of a world where we can denuclearize and cut our military budgets in half. As you can see, the United States military budget more than 3 times that of China, which is in second place, and almost 10 times that of Russia, which is supposedly the main geopolitical threat on the world stage. So, you know, this is something I think you could file under nice that he said it. Let's see if it happens, because the talk of building an Iron Dome around America, Russia just said that would be a total non-starter. We can't have any kind of denuclearization or mutual disarmament under those circumstances. Now, as for the nuclear question, nuclear spending, because what Trump said there is absolutely true. Like, there is no point in building more nuclear weapons. We already have enough nuclear weapons stockpiled to end human civilization 100 times over.
That's
true.
always been the most insane thing about the arms race, even at the height of the Cold War.
Right.
Like, how many times over do you have to be able to destroy the planet?
Exactly.
Why would you keep building more? It never made any sense to me.
At what point is it a waste of money? Like, just from
Right.
that standpoint.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. You
As
already
a
have
child
enough
of
weapons.
the Cold War, that was the thing. Even as a teenager, I always said, well, why would you need to be able to destroy the planet more than once?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Seems like it's all a giant grift, doesn't it? Global nuclear weapons spending surges to $91.4 billion. This was a report issued in June of 2024 on 2023 spending. So if you look at who spent what on nuclear weapons, the United States, more than half, 51.5 billion out of a global expenditure of 91 billion. So our military budget, I mean, we spend a 37% of total military spending of all countries in the world, but we spend more than half of all countries' nuclear spending in the world. And look at that. China, what is that, 11.9? And where is Russia? What is that, 8.3? Sorry, can't see that very well. So when you talk about denuclearization and having budgets, I mean, I guess he's got to say we could do it together with China and Russia to save face. Seems like we could make a big dent in it ourselves if we just fucking do it, right? Like if you're saying we already have enough nuclear weapons to end civilization 100 times over, which he said, and that's absolutely undeniably true, then you think we could, maybe just start cutting our own nuclear budget. We would still have a pretty big lead over the second place competitor, which would be China. And look at that, Israel over there at 1.1 billion. That's really ours. That should count in that should really be ours. That should count in our column.
Really
Surge. So this was the name of the report that was put out. Surge is the 5th edition of ICANN's Global Nuclear Weapons Spending Report. In the last 5 years, $387 billion has been spent on nuclear weapons, with the yearly spending increasing by 34% from $68.2 billion to $91.4 billion per year, as all 9 nuclear-armed states continue to modernize and, in some cases, expand their arsenals. Alicia Sanders-Zacher, co-author of the report, noted the acceleration of spending on these inhumane and destructive weapons over the past 5 years is not improving global security, but posing a global threat. So who profits from this surge in nuclear spending? Globally, nuclear-armed countries have ongoing contracts with companies to produce nuclear weapons worth a total of at least $387 billion, continuing in some cases through 2040. In 2023, companies involved in the production of nuclear weapons received new contracts worth just under $7.9 billion. In the United States and France alone, the countries for which figures can be obtained, these firms spent $118 million on lobbying. Well, that's quite the return on investment. Spend $118 million on lobbying, get $8 billion in contracts. That's what you call operating in the black, my friends.
Yep.
These large profits.
That's like when you buy a presidency for $225 million, and you have $400 billion.
It's low overhead. That's even lower overhead than podcasting.
Yep.
These large profits incentivize nuclear weapons manufacturers to spend millions, at least $6.3 million in 2023, to influence government policy and public attitudes towards nuclear weapons through supporting think tanks. In 2023, at least $123 million was spent hiring over 540 lobbyists and providing financing for major think tanks that influence the nuclear debate. Surge exposes these connections. So you could see the amount of money that these people make. These are, as the Bob Dylan song says, these are the masters of war. I mean, these are merchants of death. And you see what an enormous grift that is, making weapons that, even if you are a bloodthirsty warmonger, as Trump said, they're useless. At what point do you're not going to, you don't need $91 billion worth of nuclear weapons to destroy the world. You could probably destroy life on Earth for $10 billion worth of nuclear weapons. Right? And even that's probably...
You want to do it on the cheap, $5 billion.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sure the Chinese can have a deep-seek version, and they could do it for a few grand.
Those people,
Exactly.
they'll do it for $275,000 and an egg roll.
Exactly. And just to give you a sense, there still are grassroots denuclearization activists on the ground. New Mexicans are saying no to a new plutonium bomb factory in Los Alamos, the historic site
Haven't those
of the...
people been through enough?
Yeah, right. Exactly. The historic site of the Manhattan Project. The factory is one of the costliest projects in history and would develop plutonium cores for warheads in a new modernized nuclear weapons arsenal. Local activists say the factory would accelerate and expand the reckless nuclear arms race with Russia and China, which threatens all life on Earth. This project is underway right now. This is very, very recent. This was posted yesterday to X via Breakthrough News, which, of course, you should all follow. They do great work. Let's take a look at this.
Education and housing. Why are we putting our money towards wars and bombs?
Right now, Los Alamos National Laboratory is undergoing a huge expansion. They've already hired an additional 5,000 people, and they're going to hire more if they keep going. The reason they're doing this is to kickstart production of new kinds of nuclear weapons.
Not only do New Mexicans strongly oppose the construction of a plutonium bomb factory in our state, but that we also view these hearings as undemocratic and illegitimate. We would rather have guaranteed affordable housing in the richest country in the world. Why can't we do it? Quality education, quality accessible healthcare. Those are the things we need, not nuclear weapons. Go ahead and try and build the pit factory. We will do everything in our power to stop it.
There you go. So, look, that's happening right now as we speak. The new budget plan calls for an increase in defense spending, while calling for drastic cuts to entitlement programs like Medicare, Medicaid. That being said, obviously, if this becomes an issue, if this becomes a cause in Trump term 2, it's one that we will support if people get out there and demand this. We're a long ways away from that. And in the short term, it looks like things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, there's also, I read an article saying that part of the condition that they wanted to put on Russia was to break from China.
Yeah. Was that part of the denuclearization pact or the Ukraine thing or the Ukraine pact? It's tough to tell which that pertains to.
I've seen it in both.
I've seen it
seems
applied to
like
both.
they're
Right.
trying to work out some kind of a grand deal. Hey, look, you always said, very apt metaphor leading into the election, that Trump was Russian roulette with one chamber empty, and Harris was all 6 chambers full. This is a good case of that. It's the empty chamber. There is no question in my mind that just the death cult of Blinken, Austin, and Harris would have just kept hurtling headlong to nuclear catastrophe,
Right.
possibly with Ukraine as its flashpoint. So you got a chance here. You know, we talked about it offline. You know, some people feel this is a little black pill when we point out what I would consider very obvious, that Vance is standing in the middle of Europe, which has gone on a rampage
Right.
against pro-Palestine protesters. He's in an administration that literally is just put down an executive order that is a gross violation of the First Amendment, as FIRE, an organization that most people in the space respect, pointed out. And all he wants to talk about is the guy who prayed outside the abortion clinic. I think that's just fair and honest reporting. But, yo, man, MAGA goes denuclear. We'll be out in the streets with him. MAGA
Right,
wants to
of
have a
course.
big no nukes march. We'll be there. We'll be
Right.
there. We'll do on-the-ground reporting. We'll support it. We'll stream it. We'll do whatever we have to do to support it. We don't care who does it. You know, denuclearization, it doesn't matter. We're not Democrats. We don't care who does it.
Yeah.
So, hey, there's some potential there. At the same time, you got to remember who you're dealing with. Trump says lots of shit.
Right.
Off the top of his head.
Right. So far, this is just an off-the-cuff remark.
Yeah, just because he said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't destroy the planet? That doesn't mean it's going to go any further than that comment. That's hopeful. Sure, I don't believe you ever would have even seen such a thing proposed if Harris had won.
Well, no, obviously not. I mean, certainly not in this context. Now, what you said is interesting there because I've seen his plan to drive a wedge between Russia and China presented as part of the Ukraine deal. I have not seen it presented as part of this argument, but you are right. It kind of applies to both, broadly speaking, as a general, reshuffling of things. That's not going to happen. The United States is not a trustworthy actor. We are not a legitimate
proven
partner.
that many times over.
Yes. So that is not going to happen. So if that is a sticking point, then there's not going to be a deal. But if there is a general de-escalation of tension, perhaps down the road you can get there. The other thing you have to worry about too, Israel really talking tough on Iran. Marco Rubio, we're not going to get to that part of the speech this evening. But, he was as hawkish on Iran as any politician I've seen in recent memory. So that could obviously throw a wrench into things as well. So far, this is a comment from Trump off the cuff in the Oval Office. So far, the momentum of actual events are not only not going in the right direction, they're going in the opposite with the draft budget resolution calling for an increase in military spending. This conversation would not be on the table had Harris won. And so, if there is an opportunity for momentum there, then obviously that's something you should obviously take advantage of. Because even if this doesn't do anything to lessen the nuclear threat, because as Trump said, we already have enough weapons to destroy life on Earth. As a simple freeing up of resources, right? As a simple slashing of the defense budget, it would certainly be worthwhile if it could ever see the day where it happened.
Yeah, and we should also point out, okay, he's talking about cutting the defense budget by 50%, but that's not what he's doing. He also said he wants to increase the budget.
Right.
He said that too. Trump says a lot of things. This is, you might want to cut this because this is a little bit of a digression, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's not the kind of thing people cover a lot. All right, so Trump is trying to figure out how to get borrowing rates down. And one of the ways to get borrowing rates down is to bring down the rate on the 10-year Treasury, which is part of how they decide what the rates will be on mortgages, that kind of thing. One of the ways to do that is to decrease spending. That is part of what this whole Doge thing is about. But in spite of what he said, actions speak louder than. They're not really. I would be shocked if they cut the military budget. They're more likely to increase it. That's what he did in his first term. He gave the Pentagon more money than they asked for.
Oh, well, so far the momentum is in that direction. Absolutely.
So if you're not going to go and cut the Defense Department, this is why, as I covered in another segment, they're ginning up the enthusiasm for cutting entitlements on the premise that's, some Mexican is getting 100 Medicare payments or something. He's getting people very excited about cutting their own throats. All of this is about bringing down the Treasury rates. That's really what this is. That's the overall end game. If they can't take it from defense, and they won't, they got to take it from the entitlements. So this is why you really have to watch very carefully what they're doing and what's behind it. This is why they're so highly motivated to cut the spending, because they think that's the only way they can bring down the Treasury rates. The other way would be to bring down energy costs, but that's harder to do.
Right. All right, let's move on. Hey, Jake, can we throw up our scroll here, our patron scroll, please? So, folks, if you like what we do and you'd like to help us do more of it, please consider becoming a member at patreon.com/DoDissidents, DoDissidents.substack.com, or you can join our locals, DoDissidents.locals.com. benefits include bonus streams per month, bonus live streams. You also get call-in access to our post-show Q&As, which are every Sunday night only on Rumble. And hey, tonight is Sunday, which means we are on for tonight, weather permitting. That's the thing, Russell. I'm going to suggest that we rearrange the last two segments so that I get my last segment in before I might have to switch to my phone. Because if you look, that is the map of power outages in my area right now. The winds are really whipping, and there are a lot of power outages.
So you're not just being a nut?
No, look. All those places. Those are all power outages. Yeah, the winds are really whipping now. And there's a sheet of ice all over the power line. So now once the winds hit those power lines, that could be very bad. Hey.
I thought you were just being neurotic.
No. So if you'd like to support the program, do dissidents.locals.com. If you're watching on Rumble right now, which 1,400 of you fine people are, you could smash that bright red join button underneath the video player, and that takes you to our locals where you can sign up for as little as $5 a month to help support the program. Comes with bonus live streams, bonus content, name up in lights, call-in access to the Q&As, and the goodwill of supporting independent media. All right, Russell, you want us to plug your tour while we're here?
Yes. And hey, while I'm doing that, all right, so you got some people who are just like audio nuts. Is there, ever since I got this sound update, we weren't getting anyone saying anything about the sound, and now we're kind of getting it again. Is my mic okay? Is it?
It sounds okay to me. Is it a little low? I don't know.
I mean, you mean, it's on auto.
Yeah, I'm on auto too, so I shouldn't have a problem. Oh, why do I have my background filter off? I shouldn't have done that. I only put my background remover filter on when my kids are screaming in the next room.
Some people say it's low. Other people say it's fine.
Yeah.
Somebody just said it's much better. Jake, do something? Did you do something?
I don't know. All right, let's plug the tour.
Yeah, now I'm on auto. All right. Okay, so coming up, March 14th, 15th, St. Patrick's Day weekend, I will be resurrecting my favorite tour that I ever created, the Irish Mob of Hell's Kitchen, in which I will be taking you through the west side of Manhattan to all of the sites of the bloody mob hits, places where the last gang that was active in Hell's Kitchen, the Westies, active all the way through the 80s. You got some of those guys still hanging around that neighborhood. They used to cut up bodies in the bathroom of one of the places we go. So it's going to be that kind of an evening. I'll also take you to the schoolyard that inspired the Paul Simon musical, the ill-fated Paul Simon musical, The Cape Man. That was based on one of those, some crimes like the Son of Sam capture the national imagination. The Cape Man murders were one of those crimes. It's been largely forgotten now. So it's about 2 hours, and I'll take you through the whole history of the Irish mob with an emphasis on the modern history of the mob. Most of the people we talk about are still alive, actually.
All right. So there you go. DoDissidents.com/tour for tickets. Awesome. The pendulum swings back as far as it was pulled, says Brad Gilbert. Thank you, Brad Gilbert. Appreciate that. Eric Suarez, if they take us all to prison for supporting Palestine, should we join a gang there or make our own? Say we make our own, obviously. That's the kind of guy I am.
These are strange times, man.
Yep.
I got to say, of all the time that we've been doing the show, this is the weirdest time. I almost feel like I felt when the Bernie thing, when all that happened, and you had to shift your whole media diet. You had to shift who you followed. You had to, I haven't felt that way since then.
Yeah, it is a strange time for sure. Eric Main, so when in UK, that's Benny Hinn. Yes, Benny Hill, no. Doctor Who, yes. Criticizing WHO, no. Spice Girls, yes. Spite-filled Palestinian girls protesting, no. There you go. Thank you, Eric Mains. Appreciate that. David Bozick, Keaton, Brian Berletic at the New Atlas agrees with your analysis of Vance's speech. All BD. Thank you, David. Appreciate that.
We're trying to get him on. We're trying to get him on. I'm connected to him on Facebook, but he never uses it.
There you go. Yeah, we will do our best. We will do our best. John M. in Minnesota, also, in case you missed it, AP reporters not allowed at White House briefings since they don't recognize Gulf of America. Yes. Yes, they were banned. I tweeted that out, actually, from my personal account. By the way, follow my personal account at @ThatKeaton on Twitter, because, you know, I didn't tweet this out from the main account because Russell doesn't like me teasing them too much in this way. But I quote tweeted that headline where they banned the AP for not recognizing Gulf of America. I said, this is the gayest fascism ever.
I mean, it was funny.
It was funny. Yeah. So I did that from my personal account.
Yes.
Yep. Healing Tarzan, when are you guys going to have a convo with Jimmy about the first month of the second Trump administration? I think that would be interesting and edifying.
You know, I had that conversation
Yes.
on the phone.
Yes.
On the phone, because we're friends.
Right. We
talked about it. You know?
We have been in touch, indeed, for sure. I am the Owl. Any words from J.D. Vance about how America uses its proxies to directly kill actual American citizens, like IDF soldiers killing Isanor Igi or Ukrainian government torturing Gonzalo Lira? Nope. As I would expect, I am the Owl. Thank you for the question. All right, folks. So we're going to do, we got two more segments. I'm going to do one here. So in case I have to switch to my cell phone, Russ can run exhibits on the last one. All righty. So we are amidst the last days of the supposed phase 1 of the Israel-Gaza ceasefire. And so I just want to refresh people's memory here, because I tweeted something about this that some people didn't understand. And I think they didn't understand because most people understood it, but some people didn't. Because I think they were forgetting the context here of Trump just about a week ago saying Israel should end the ceasefire on Saturday, meaning yesterday, and let all hell break out if all of Israeli hostages were not returned, even though the original terms of the ceasefire were to drip them out slowly according to the phases of the ceasefire, so that as hostages come back, we advance the ceasefire steps so that eventually all hostages are returned and a ceasefire permanently is implemented. That's the goal. But Trump tried to change the deal last week and say, hey, if we don't get all the hostages back at once, we should just let all hell break out. So here's that video in case that's not fresh in your mind.
And if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off, and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock.
So that was the deadline that he imposed for all hostages to be returned. Now, Saturday has come and gone, and of course, the hostages were returned in accordance with the deal. So Israel and Hamas complete their latest exchange as ceasefire's first phase has just 2 weeks left. So not all hostages were returned. The terms were stuck by. So I believe 3 Israeli hostages were returned in exchange for some Palestinian prisoners, as the media calls them. Of course, we would call them hostages as well. But basically, what Trump said did not happen. And so, because that did not happen, Trump tries to nudge Netanyahu into breaking the ceasefire. Hamas has just released 3 hostages from Gaza, including an American citizen. They seem to be in good shape. This differs from their statement last week that they would not release any hostages. Israel will now have to decide what they will do about the 12 o'clock today deadline in big capital letters imposed on the release of all hostages. The United States will back the decision they make. So that is Donald Trump trying to sabotage the ceasefire deal. Now, my theory about this is that the reason he's doing this is because he knows that his displacement plan is a non-starter. Even a lot of Republican politicians and Republican commentators are not backing him up on that. Even Michael Savage wasn't backing him up on that. That's how you know how much of a non-starter that is. And so because that's a non-starter, he now, in order to avoid taking the L politically, or worse, having to double down and commit troops to Gaza, which is, of course, a complete non-starter with everybody, he now needs for Israel to finish the job. And so that's my theory. Now he realizes that because he stepped in it, he is now trying to sabotage these ceasefires. However, Netanyahu has his own priorities and his own things that he has to be concerned about. That's why this is creating a standoff, not so much between Israel and Gaza, but between Israel and Trump, right? Because they're both kind of afraid to jump first. Netanyahu cagey on Israel's next steps as Trump deadline to free all hostages passes. So this was reported by Times of Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held security consultations Saturday night on the future of the hostage ceasefire deal after Hamas released 3 more living male hostages earlier in the day. Netanyahu wants to expedite the release of 6 remaining living hostages who are scheduled to be freed the next 2 Saturdays, according to Hebrew media reports. Channel 13 reported that Israel is aiming to get the 6 released in the coming days. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump suggested that Israel end the ceasefire in Gaza and resume fighting if all remaining hostages were not freed by Saturday, after the Hamas terror group said it was delaying their release. Trump said Saturday was up to Israel to decide how to respond to Hamas missing his deadline. Israel, he wrote on his Truth Social, which we just read, must decide what they will do about the 12 o'clock today deadline imposed on the release of all hostages. The United States will back the decision they make. Netanyahu's office on Saturday evening released a vague statement that gave no indication of what Israel will do next. Netanyahu, quote, appreciates the president's full support for Israel's decisions regarding the Gaza Strip going forward, said the prime minister's office. The prime minister will convene the security cabinet as soon as possible to decide Israel's next steps. Netanyahu highly appreciates Trump's leadership and the ongoing coordination with the United States, the statement added. Netanyahu wants to extend the current first phase of the deal beyond the designated 42 days, which are set to end on March 1st, and secure the freedom of more hostages as part of phase 1, including more hostages Israel now knows are in poor health, according to Channel 12. The premier reportedly wants Israel's negotiators to argue to the Qatari and Egyptian mediators with U.S. support that it's also in the interest of Hamas to extend Phase 1 and thus the current ceasefire, since Phase 2 has not been finalized and the war would resume if no agreement is reached on Phase 2. Netanyahu has refused to allow Israel's negotiators to engage in talks on the agreement's second phase, which would see the release of the remaining hostages in exchange for a permanent end to the war. See, now here's where Netanyahu is in a tough spot. Politically, he feels he can't afford to end the war. But politically, he also feels he can't afford to have these hostages killed. Right. And so he is going to lean more on Trump to give him the ultimate victory that Trump basically promised him when he came to Washington, which is, hey, we'll get all these hostages back in a phased ceasefire, and then we're going to ethnically cleanse Gaza, right? Because that is the kind of win-win that could save Netanyahu's face. Absent both of those things coming true, Netanyahu is kind of screwed. So that creates this very strange sort of standoff between the United States and Israel. In the sense that Netanyahu would love to go in and continue fighting because that accomplishes one objective. But if he does that and the hostages get killed, well, then that's a huge problem. Exactly, for him as well. Israeli negotiators, however, warned that unless Israel begins serious negotiations on Phase 2, which were required under the deal to start almost 2 weeks ago, it risks jeopardizing the rest of the scheduled Phase 1 releases. The sixth release of hostages during the ongoing ceasefire came hours before U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio landed in Israel ahead of his meetings on Sunday in Jerusalem with Israeli leaders. He is on his first Middle East trip as America's top diplomat. Rubio indicated last week that renewed fighting in Gaza would not ultimately end the threat that Hamas poses to Israel, just 2 days after he appeared to back a resumption of the war. Someone has to confront Hamas. Who's that going to be? It's not going to be American soldiers. If the countries in the region can't figure that piece out, then Israel's going to have to do it. And then we're back to where we've been, so that doesn't solve the problem. Of course, this is a problem of Trump's creation, because by promising to ethnically purge Gaza, right, and by having that plan really blow up in his face because no one backs him on it, well, now Trump needs Israel to do it, right? Rubio said in an interview with conservative radio host Clay Travis and Buck Sexton. So here is Rubio's piece of the press conference pertaining to the Gaza ceasefire and the future of Gaza.
The president's also been very bold about his view of what the future for Gaza should be. Not the same tired ideas of the past, but something that's bold and something that, frankly, took courage and vision in order to outline. And it may have shocked and surprised many, but what cannot continue is the same cycle where we repeat over and over again and wind up in the exact same place. Related to that, the president's been very clear. Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force. And frankly, as long as it stands as a force that can govern, or as a force that can administer, or as a force that can threaten by use of violence, peace becomes impossible. They must be eliminated. They must be eradicated.
Okay, so that suggests no permanent ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what Netanyahu has to say. This is even more ominous. From Kosher, whose side do you think he's on? Some strong words here.
Hey, Muslims keep kosher too.
That's right. President Trump and I are fully coordinated with a shared strategy. Not everything can be revealed, including when the gates of hell will open. This is Netanyahu with Rubio by his side.
Secretary Rubio for President Trump's assistance in helping us secure the release of another 3 hostages yesterday. These are hostages that Hamas refused to support only a few days to release only a few days earlier. And I also thanked him for America's unequivocal backing for Israel's policy in Gaza in moving forward. I want to assure everyone who's now listening to us, President Trump and I are working in full cooperation and coordination between us. We have a common strategy, and we can't always share the details of this strategy with the public, including when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will if all our hostages are not released until the last one of them.
Okay. You put all that together, and it does not look great for a permanent ceasefire before the end of the war. I just don't see how they're able to get there. Trump already tried to sabotage this. I want everybody to understand this. This is a murderous act that he did when he tweeted this. I don't know why this did not get more attention. I don't know why this slipped past people's radar. Maybe too many people were jerking off to J.D. Vance's speech in Germany. Who the hell knows? But he literally tried to blow up the deal. He literally tried to nudge Israel into restarting the war. And don't forget, they have 2,000-pound bombs now because he sent them to them. And he's promising, as Netanyahu just said, the gates of hell opening. Could it be Netanyahu's just trying to get as many hostages back as he can before the deal inevitably collapses? Because don't forget, he's trying to extend phase 1 and get more hostages back during phase 1 before they have to agree to a ceasefire without the total displacement of Hamas from Gaza. And obviously, Trump's plan to get everybody out is obviously not going to happen. And so could that be the strategy? let's just filibuster and get as many hostages out before inevitably we just unleash hell? Because Trump obviously is leaning on Israel to do it at this point, since there's no support for his plan, which is the Riviera plan. But Netanyahu, as much as he would like to resume hostilities, he needs his hostages back. So it's very complicated at this moment. But when you put together Trump's statement with Rubio's statement, with Netanyahu's statement, this seems like another episode of Israel agreeing to a ceasefire, violating the ceasefire, figuring out some way to blame the Palestinians for the collapse of the ceasefire, and the brutality continues. I hope I'm wrong about that, but this is at this sort of awkward sort of standoff stage right now, and it's a very, very tense and tenuous moment, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the game that Netanyahu is playing is get as many hostages as possible,
right,
before he finds a pretense to continue.
Exactly. That's what it looks like to me.
And once he does, Trump's going to go all in. They're going to just, create a narrative about what Hamas did to cause them to have to react to it and defend Israel and defense of Israel at all costs. And that's going to be it, man. They're going to go full on. And that's where you're really going to have a lot of people who, decided to take Vance's shaft for that speech are going to have a lot to answer for later on when this administration turns murderous and genocidal. It'd be very interesting. All these people who felt, Harris, if you're just talking about, hey, as long as there's something good, we'll get behind it. Well, you were talking about she was offering $25,000 down payment for a house. Now, I'm not saying you should have voted for Harris. We didn't believe in that. But same logic applies, right? If the genocide was negotiable, provided there were good things you could support, I mean, you could argue that with them too.
Right. You could argue that in either direction. And not to repeat myself, but I think I should, since apparently we're the only people who seem to have noticed this this tweet. The United States will back the decision they make. Israel will have to decide what they will do about the deadline today imposed on the release of all hostages. That was the deadline that he set from the Oval Office when he ran his mouth, saying, I think they should break the ceasefire if they don't get all of the hostages back. He was egging them on to unleash hell on the Palestinians. Right. That was an attempt to sabotage the deal. And the only reason Netanyahu didn't do it is because he knows he's toast if those hostages do not come back at this point. That's the only reason. That's the only reason that hell was not unleashed, is because Netanyahu was like, you know what? I can't go there yet. Phase 1 is not over. We need as many hostages out during phase 1 before we can come up with an excuse to sabotage it in phase 2. Ideally, all of them. Ideally, he will filibuster and filibuster and filibuster and get all of them out and then come up with an excuse, as they have done countless times in the past. This is the Israeli playbook. They agree to ceasefires and they break ceasefires and they blame the Palestinians, and the world backs them up on it because there's nobody to take the Palestinian side. A child can't take the Palestinian side in Germany without being run down by a dozen cops.
Right. That's been the history of Israel from the beginning. From the beginning, they have always. It's in the book behind me here, going all the way back to 1948. They were going to negotiate a resolution with the Palestinians with the UN, and there were actually internal memos of them deciding, you know what, let's not make an agreement. We'll probably get something better later. They have just, their aim has always been the Greater Israel Project. Everything that they do only really makes sense in that context. It's not consistent with people who want to live in peace with the Palestinians. It's consistent with people who are constantly trying to find pretexts for taking more of their land so that their overall project of creating this Greater Israel can be achieved. And to that end, they have spent over 70 years demonizing this population.
Of course. And we didn't even talk about, we're going to get more into this on Tuesday. We didn't even talk about Rubio's, just absolutely insane saber rattling about Iran, talking about how they're the most destabilizing force in the Middle East. No, not the white colony that dropped down into the middle of the Arab world with the full backing of the United States military and a murderous expansionist agenda. No, that's not the destabilizing factor in the Middle East. It's the Arab nation. If you're a white European settler and you set up shop in the Middle East and you find the presence of Arabs to be destabilizing, you can turn around and go the fuck home. I mean, that's a peaceful way to handle it. But no, it's Iran that's the destabilizing force in the Middle East, not Israel. Absolutely psychotic. Absolutely just blood in the eyes psychotic, which is what you'd expect from a little pimp like Marco Rubio.
Of course, yeah. I think to get a lot of people in the space to notice it, you're gonna have to retweet it out from like Joe Biden's account or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, oh my God! Did you see what he said?
Right.
This crickets.
Yep.
Crickets.
We shall see. All right. Let's take some more Rumble rants and super chats, and then we'll do the final segment of the evening. Out the Matrix. I've been watching you guys for a long time. Anyone discussing government spending and does not mention the 2018 SFFAS 56 law entitled Classified Activities are not serious people. Thank you, Out the Matrix. The Quran burner also burned Palestinian flag. He was POS. Ex-Muslims are literally the only community that still defends the Iraq war. I feel nothing for that POS. All right. CEB, Applejack. If I get the Patreon, then can I get special access to tell you I can't stand Jimmy. Yeah, right, exactly. Like we said, man. Go ahead.
That's a good friend of ours. Like we talked over the weekend.
Yeah, we talked to him.
Yeah. In terms of, somebody was saying you want to have that conversation on the air. Honestly, I really don't disagree much. It would be pretty boring. Like we, obviously disagree on certain things, but it's more a question of emphasis than a question of kind. Like it's not.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true.
It's not like. If you're paying attention, it's not like Jimmy's like, no, these are not corrupt billionaires. This is, he's focusing a lot on what he feels is getting accomplished, which. Look, as far as this, and, this is, Glenn as well, a lot of people who have really focused particularly on fighting against these criminals in the FBI and the Justice Department, particularly people who have been Russiagated themselves in a serious way. Like you have people in the space who literally had to worry about maybe getting arrested or prosecuted.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think particularly if you experience that, watching these people have to fear their own prosecution, of course that's satisfying. I'm satisfied by it, and it didn't happen to me.
I'm satisfied. I said my exact quote when we did the segment on the FBI was, I hope they starve in the streets.
Yeah, exactly. There's no mercy, no sympathy for U.S. aid or any of these people. Of course, I can see that, that satisfaction. I think for a lot of people who are cheering that on, the feeling is, well, and this is true, how else would you have gotten rid of these people? Like, there was no other way. There was no player on the board that would have done this besides Trump. And, Christian Parenti in his interview with Jimmy, and I agree that Trump is doing this out of revenge. They came for him. It's the old saying, if you're going to shoot at the king, maybe literally, you better not miss, right? So they missed. The guy's in office, and now he's coming for them, right? So enemy of my enemy is my friend. I get it. I think it's naive when you look at what they're doing as a whole. When you look at, they went right in and broke the NLRB. They went right in and went after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They went right in and signed an executive order to go after people for pro-Palestine speech on college campuses. They're telling you who they are and what their intentions are. And beyond that, if you read Curtis Yarvin, who J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, they're big aficionados. He's kind of the intellectual godfather of their whole movement. He's a monarchist, and his vision of how you would get rid of the democratic government and replace it with a monarch or a CEO or basically an all-powerful executive is exactly what they're doing. Exactly. He says, go in, shut down the agencies, fire everybody, and when the judges try to stop you, basically tell them to go get their fucking shine box. Now that is a Rubicon they haven't quite crossed yet. They've been playing games with the judges, not following the order, but pretending they are trying to follow the order, and then they're playing games. They haven't gone to, well, fuck you. Probably because they don't feel like they have to, because they can appeal up to the Supreme Court, and whose Supreme Court is this, right? So in the end, why create a constitutional crisis when you could probably get the court to sign off on all of this in the end? But I think that not looking at that and only looking at the fact that they broke these agencies without looking at what their plan is for replacing it, especially if you're somebody who speaks out about these kinds of causes, who speaks out about Zionism, how long do you think they're going to let you do that? How long?
Well, that's the thing.
J.D. Vance just told you he doesn't give a shit about that by giving a speech in the middle of Europe without ever mentioning it. They told you that, combined with the fact that back here at home, they're signing executive orders to suppress speech on campus. They're telling you that they do not respect your right to that kind of speech, and they will suppress it if they want. You know how you worry about getting shut down by YouTube now? What do you think it's going to be like when YouTube pulls a Mark Zuckerberg? Right? You think you're going to be able to talk about that? I think if you're in this space and you're not talking about that now, you're in for a rude awakening when you're not able to talk about it later.
Yeah, I think that because everything is shifting so quickly, you know, and as you predicted, you know, the culture is shifting very, 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 very quickly now. Which is, you know, as we suspected, you know, big tech will just fall in line because it's easier for them not to work. I mean, they don't want to work. I mean, they just, whatever, path of least resistance is the path they'll take. As for the super chat, I thought that, I took the super chat as a joke because we know there's been a lot of chatter about that. And, you know, we talk. That's all I can say. That's all I can say is we talk. You know, Jimmy is a very for someone of his profile, he's a remarkably accessible person. Like, we interviewed him once on the show. We were both going to go see his comedy show. My kid had Kawasaki. My kid had a major health scare that week, so that's why I didn't go. But just after that, he's like, here's my number. Let's go eat sometime. And so, you know, like, and so, you know, a lot of these people who have these major flame wars with him, I think his attitude is, hey, you got my number. You know, if we don't see eye to eye on something, we could talk about it. And that's what we do. We talk about it. And that's that.
And we do. And at the end of the day, bottom line, you know a thing by what it does, man. Who's putting RBN on? Who has that kind of a platform?
Who's flying across the country to do a Jose Vega fundraiser in a I don't want to denigrate the space. It was a nice space. It was a funky little space.
Yeah, it was
the first
hot.
one, not the second one.
It was hotter than hell.
Yeah.
and to this day, he never complained about it to me, even privately.
Right.
You know, he was a sport about it that night, and he never bitched about it after.
Didn't even complain about the air conditioning.
That's it. You know, look, this space, it grew aesthetically from the cable news model, and the cable news model is very WWE. Like, the idea that friends can disagree and talk about it. Like, I get it, man. People want, are you not entertained? They want a big fucking, you know, it doesn't have to be like that, man.
Right. All right, man, this wind is really whipping up bad. Clark, thanks for the $5. Tusker, you might have to do the Q&A by yourself if my power goes out. Just kidding. Clark, thank you for all you do. You guys keep me sane. Thank you. I love a full current book list from you two, especially Russell. You talk about books you were reading, but I lost track. and I need to keep up. We used to do a book club. Didn't you used to mention a book you were reading?
You know, man, I just saw a few people do that. Candace Owens apparently does that. I know that now because I have been watching her. What's his wife's name?
Who?
Brigitte Macron. I've been watching the Brigitte Macron series. It's quite interesting. But yeah, she has a book club. We should do that. We should have a book club.
It's not a bad idea.
Like a lot of people do that. Like they read the book. It's like book club. But
Yeah, you say the book, and then you read the book, and then you have to come back and talk about it.
Yeah.
Intersectional fascism. Thank you, Mr. Fancy Pants. Aren't most of the remaining Israeli hostages actually soldiers? Well, that's the other thing, yes. Jeff, I love Sundays with the 2 live Jews. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Gates of hell to further dehumanize Palestinians. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that, Jeff. Appreciate that. All right. I marched behind Richard Medhurst and Russell on Day X in London last February. Let's not allow them to make Richard the next Assange. Stand with Richard Medhurst, pardon Julian Assange. Absolutely. Thank you. U.S. needs to cut by 80% to make it even remotely fair, worthwhile. I agree, China Shield. Thank you very much. All right, we got one more segment on the night, folks. One more song.
All right, I'm assuming the position. Yeah, Robbie, I know. Robbie's reminding me I got a 3 a.m. flight. All right. Well, I mean, I got to be up at 3 a.m. All right. Well, you're my mother. You're my mother. Okay. All right. So let's set it up. So a lot has been going on over the last week that have discomfited our allies in Europe, our so-called allies in Europe, our theoretical allies in Europe. So Pete Hegseth went up there and basically did his best Goodfellas. Go get your fucking shine box.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
Now, anybody who has been screaming about the fact that the idea that Russia was going to be defeated in this war was unrealistic and that it was going to end exactly this way had to be cheered by that, I must say. So Glenn Dyson, who is a professor of Russian foreign policy, he said here, Glenn retweeted him. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Ukraine will not be part of NATO and will not get its pre-2014 territories back. This was obvious 3 years ago. Yet hundreds of thousands of men were sent to their deaths. Our governments, media, and NGOs pushed ridiculous narratives of Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is losing fewer troops than Russia, and other obvious lies to sell a long war to the public and maintain the war enthusiasm while shutting down free speech by smearing, censoring, and canceling anyone who challenged their war narratives with facts. True that. Ukraine has been more dangerous to talk about than Palestine very often.
Yeah, for sure.
Who have we known? Didn't somebody get pulled off for talking?
Oh,
about
there
Ukraine?
were a few channels that got pulled and then they got put back on. DD Geopolitics, Rachel Blevins, and Mark Sloboda. I don't know.
Right.
Did Mark Sloboda ever get put back on? I think so. I think so. Yeah, but no, they all just got pulled.
Ukraine could have had its pre-February 2022 territory back in return for neutrality. Yet the U.S.-UK sabotaged the Istanbul Agreement for a long war to use Ukrainians to bleed Russia, and the media refused to report on it. Our governments then refused any diplomacy for 3 years as they watched all these young men die. The warmongers sold it as moral, principle, and supporting Ukraine. Ukraine is now destroyed. Russia is organizing its economy toward China and the East. Europe is destined for economic decline, political instability, and growing irrelevance in the world. Nobody will be held accountable, and their absurd narratives will continue to be immune to facts. No lies detected there.
Nope.
Okay, so this was a little bit of an embarrassment at the conference. So this was Roger Wicker, a Trump ally, was interviewed by Politico and kind of said some things about Hegseth that were not from the hymnal. Quote, Hegseth is going to be a great defense secretary, although he wasn't my choice for the job, the Mississippi Republican told Politico on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. But he made a rookie mistake in Brussels, and he's walked back some of what he said, but not that line. I don't know who wrote the speech. It is the kind of thing Tucker Carlson could have written, and Carlson is a fool, Wicker said, referring to the pro-Putin broadcaster. All right, that's their words, not mine. Speaking to Jonathan Martin at the Politico pub in the Munich conference, Wicker, a staunch Ukraine supporter, said he was surprised by Hegseth's original comments and heartened that the new defense secretary had reversed course. Wicker said he favors a firm posture with Moscow. Quote, everybody knows and people in the administration know you don't say before your first meeting what you will agree to and what you won't agree to, Wicker said, adding that he was puzzled and disturbed by Hegseth's comments. So our illustrious leader was asked about this. This is what he had to say.
Roger Wicker shepherded Defense Secretary Hegseth through his confirmation. He got him through that process, and then he had some tough words for him overseas. He said it was a rookie mistake for Secretary Hegseth to outline what would or would not happen as far as Ukraine's membership in NATO goes. And then
I haven't heard that. I mean, Roger's a very good friend of mine, and Peter's obviously, he's been doing a great job.
Did you know
I haven't heard. Let me look at. You tell me something. I have not heard about.
The question I had is, were you aware of what Secretary Hegseth was going to say in his speech at NATO?
Generally speaking, yeah. Generally speaking, I was. So I'll speak to Roger. I'll speak to Pete. I'll find out.
Mr. President.
Yeah, I don't think Pete's the one he's going to lean on. So the Munich conference was really one of tears for the Europeans. We covered a little earlier J.D. Vance's speech in which you could hear a pin drop in that room. Zelensky went on. Now, look, this guy, he's always working the angles. He sees the U.S. is about to sail off into the sunset. He's trying to get Europe to pick up the slack.
Talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
It's like one guy.
This is not harder than standing firm against Russian attacks, as we have already done. But this is not just about increasing defense spending as a GDP ratio. Money is needed, of course, yes, but money alone will not stop an enemy assault. People and weapons don't come for free. But again, it's not just about budgets. It's about people realizing the need to defend their own home.
Okay. So they had a big conference with J.D. Vance there in Munich with Zelensky. Basically, it kind of plays as a humiliation ritual for Zelensky. Let's see. You kind of get that vibe here.
Good conversations about how we might accomplish that together, and certainly we'll have many more in the days, weeks, and months to come. President Zelensky.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Very briefly, I think Vice President said everything absolutely correct. We are very thankful for American support. President Trump, we had good conversation today. Our first meeting, not last, I'm sure, and really what we need to speak more, to work more, and to prepare the plan how to stop Putin and finish the war. We want peace very much, but we need real security guarantees, and we will continue our meetings and our work, and we will be very happy to see General Kalak also in Ukraine in this closest time. Thank you, Vice President, for meeting. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all.
Mr. Vice
Take care, guys.
President, how does this move forward if Ukraine is not ready to come to the table with Putin? If Ukraine is not ready to speak with Putin at the table, how do you move forward? Will you still negotiate?
Well, look, I think the way that this conversation moves us forward is, first of all, you have great members of the Ukrainian delegation. You have our incredible Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, here. We have General Kellogg. It's important for us to get together and start to have the conversations that are going to be necessary to bring this thing to a close. That's all I'm going to say for now, because I want to preserve the optionality here from the negotiators and our respective teams to bring this thing to a responsible close. Thank you all. Have a good night.
What is the timeline for this deal?
Yeah.
Get your hand out of my pocket!
Translation. Get your hand out of my pocket. The Europeans really were discomfited. Now, Amuse here, he is a MAGA shill account, but he has this right. The next German chancellor claims the decision to admit Ukraine has already been made and Trump cannot stop it. Friedrich doesn't seem to know any single NATO country can block another country from joining the alliance, which is absolutely true, and it's kind of remarkable that he doesn't seem to know that.
From the last NATO summit, there is an agreement within NATO that Ukraine gets the perspective of becoming a member. And for this to be changed, NATO has to do it jointly. And I don't agree with anybody who is putting NATO membership off the table before the negotiations with Russia have begun. So there is a status, there is an agreement, there is something NATO has already decided, and to change it might be an option. But this is not something which one NATO member alone has to decide on.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That's not true. That's literally legally not true. So apparently, J.D. Vance said, hey, nobody can humiliate the Europeans more than I just humiliated them. And our representative at Munich said, hold my beer. This is quite a remarkable bit of footage in which the interviewer just increasingly gets just flustered at the idea that he's just saying, yeah, nah, you know what? You guys are going to protect Ukraine. We're taking the minerals and we're not going to do shit. Good luck with that.
Heard loud and clear that the Europeans need to be at the table and that Ukrainians need to be at the table. And you described a parallel structure. You have a Russia file talking to the Russians and you're talking to the Ukrainians. Isn't this cutting the Ukrainians out of the real negotiations? The fulcrum seems to be the Trump administration, with these two things going in parallel. Can you assure this audience that Ukrainians will be at the table and Europeans will be at the table?
Oh, well, you just changed the whole dynamic. Victor, thanks for having us today. I appreciate it. The answer to that last question, just as you framed it, the answer is no.
So the Europeans, who have provided as much or more support than the Americans in this process, you don't think should be at the table directly. You think it should be two protagonists.
What does that mean in this process?
I said I'm a school of realism. I think that's not going to happen. But I said that's one of the reasons I'm here talking.
She means the negotiations. And I'm sorry, I forget his name. I can look it up.
This is Keith Kellogg, right?
What's that?
This is Keith Kellogg.
There you go.
The envoy.
Kellogg.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the reasons we're going out, we're doing it to making sure that their positions are well known, that when we go into these positions, they're well stated. Now, that may be graded like fingers on a chalkboard. That may grade a little bit, but I'm telling you something that's really quite honest. President Trump inherited this war of 3 years ago. Okay, his desire, purpose is to make sure this war stops. It stops for good, and the aggression is over, and Ukraine remains a sovereign, secure state with secure security backing behind it. That's the intent. And that's going to depend on everybody in this room when we talk about security guarantees. You have to understand when you sign up for these security guarantees, that is an obligation. And the reason I say that, and I challenge many people that are out there, right now, 2014 Wales Declaration, all the NATO allies, 2% of GDP, 20% of that was modernization. There are still 8 nations who've not even gotten to that number. Okay? So when we get to it, make sure you check your 6, as they say, that the obligation is upon you when we make these commitments to respond to that as well. So there's a challenge for you.
Home and get your fucking shine box.
All right, but this was probably the topper. Tears flow at Munich Security Conference. This is the chief of the Munich Security Conference in tears. He was not able to finish his speech.
Conference started as a transatlantic conference. After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelensky. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Standing ovation for that. Now, I'm surprised that has not gotten more coverage, because that is one of the most remarkable moments I think I've ever seen at an international conference like that. I mean, basically, the American delegations went to Europe, humiliated the Europeans, literally humiliated the Europeans, and told them, yeah, go fuck yourself. We're going to make a separate piece. You're not going to be involved, as we'll see in the article we're going to take a look at. And we're going to take what we want, and you guys can foot the bill, and we're not going to defend you anymore either. And also, your laws suck, and you need more speech.
Yeah,
and,
right.
If fascist parties are running, you better let them, or you're going to hear from us. That was basically the American message to Europe in this. You know, it's like 2016 was the warm up, and this is really the full on MAGA foreign policy. It really is. So now the European leaders are scrambling to hold an emergency summit. European leaders are set to gather next week for an emergency summit on the war in Ukraine in response to concerns the U.S. is moving ahead with Russia on peace talks that will lock out the continent. Sir Keir Starmer, who is expected to attend the summit in Paris, said it was a once-in-a-generation moment for our national security, and it was clear Europe must take a greater role in NATO. It comes after Donald Trump's special envoy to Ukraine said European leaders would be consulted but not take part in any talks between U.S. and Russia over ending the war. Senior White House figures, including U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, are due to meet Russian negotiators in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. U.S. officials said that Ukraine was also invited, although President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country has received no such invitation. The UK Prime Minister will discuss the views of European leaders when he visits U.S. President Trump at the White House at the end of this month. A further meeting of European leaders together with Zelensky is expected after Sir Keir returns from Washington. Sir Keir said that the UK would work to ensure we keep the U.S. and Europe together, adding the two could not, quote, allow any divisions in the alliance to distract from external enemies. This is a once-in-a-generation moment for our national security, where we engage with the reality of the world today and the threat we face from Russia, he said. Russia! It's clear Europe must take on a greater role in NATO as we work with the United States to secure Ukraine's future and face down the threat we face from Russia. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski said Emmanuel Macron had called the summit of European leaders, which has not yet been announced by the French president. Sikorski said, quote, President Trump has a method of operating, which the Russians call reconnaissance through battle. You can tell a lot about people by what they have a word for. You push and you see what happens, and then you change your position, legitimate tactics, and we need to respond. I hate to tell you this, I think he means it, but okay. Earlier this week, the U.S. president announced he had a lengthy phone conversation with the Russian leader and that negotiations to stop the ridiculous war in Ukraine would begin immediately. Trump then informed Zelensky of his plan. Trump appeared confident that his leadership style could pave the way for a peace deal in Ukraine. His rapprochement with Putin brought an end to more than 3 years of silence between Moscow and Washington. I just want to take a second and comment on that. Biden, I don't know if he was capable. The more we hear, they didn't even want him talking to the kitchen staff. We did not talk to them for 3 years. For anybody who said, Trump has no right to be president, they did. The people who made the decision not to speak to Putin for 3 years with this war raging in the heart of Europe, these people deserved to occupy that position of power. That's a big part of why he's there. I just read something, I don't know if it's true, but I suspect it is, that Trump already surpassed the number of press conferences Joe Biden did in 4 years.
Interesting. I mean, makes sense.
Makes sense. You see every day, almost every day, I see the guy talking to the press. It's very strange after so many years
yes.
of not seeing a president talking to the press.
Multiple times a day, most days. The other thing is to claim that Ukraine is being left out of these talks. Okay, I say this as someone who, is not particularly invested in America. I don't particularly like America. I'm not inclined to, claim American ownership over projects or entities or countries. Right?
Come on, the donuts.
Yeah, but what I would say is that, when we back you financially the way we have, and we wage essentially a proxy war against Russia through you, we are your representation. Like, we are your seat at the table. You're not getting a seat at the table. We supported you, and now we are going to try and end this war. The idea that they are owed a seat at the table, okay, well, if we just pulled out of this process altogether and gave you no more aid and no more weapons, at that point, Putin could have his way with Ukraine.
Sure.
To whatever extent he wants. Now, we don't want that to happen, and you know what? Neither does Putin. Putin didn't even want Ukraine. Putin never even wanted Kiev, right? His terms are very, very simple. Independence for the separatist regions, Crimea, and a neutral Ukraine. So nobody wants to see Ukraine decimated. Keith Kellogg said that. Pete Hegseth said that. We want a sovereign Ukraine, right? This is not being done to pulverize Ukraine or to punish Ukraine. This is being done to save what's left of Ukraine, which unfortunately is very, very little, thanks to the psychotic leadership of Joe Biden, who waged this war through you. That's why people called it a proxy war, because that's what it was. So now we're negotiating to end it. And if you want a seat at the table, you can have one if you agree to end it on our terms, because we're the ones who kept it going for all these years.
Well, when you look at the arguments that, people like McConnell back here, most of the Republicans would like to continue the Ukraine project. But when you look at what the European leaders are saying about how, we have to do this, same song. Russia is going to come for other countries next. Why would they?
It's
like
the same
these
kind of-
issues are not at play anywhere else. This is not, Putin does not have those kinds of expansionist territorial ambitions. This was a very unique situation where these are heavily Russian-speaking provinces that were being attacked by the Ukrainians for years before he made this move.
It sounds as delusional as the stay the course crowd during the last days of the Bush years, when the public had realized that Iraq was a horrible mistake. You still had that chorus of neocons saying, no, we got to stay the course. Why?
Right.
Why?
Right.
To get up there
Right.
and act as if this is a battle of values and that we have to stay the course for our values, and to get literally teary-eyed at the realization that the war's not winnable, it's not worth fighting anymore, and that whatever abstract appeal to modern values versus Russian values, basically new values versus old values, basically what he's saying there,
right.
that's not going to be enough to keep the war going. Yeah, that makes him very sad, because that's a room full of people who have really convinced themselves that they are on the right side of history in waging these wars. And once they realize that not only are they taking the L on the battlefield, but they have really lost the cultural argument to these retrograde forces as represented by Russia and now a fascist United States. Yeah, that is a very, very bitter pill that they all had to swallow at once.
Well, our friend Voldemir is not going to go gently into that good night. He does not agree with your assessment, Keaton.
President Trump said this week he did not say yes when he was asked if he sees Ukraine as an equal member in the peace process. He did say later that Ukraine would have a seat at the table. Have you been given any assurances that Ukraine will have an equal seat at the negotiating table?
So I will never accept any decisions between the United States and Russia about Ukraine. Never. And our people, never. And our adults and children and everybody. It can't be so. This is the war in Ukraine against us, and it's our human losses. And we are thankful for all the support, unity between USA, in USA, around Ukraine support, bipartisan unity, bipartisan support. We're thankful for all of this, but there is no any leader in the world who can really make a deal with Putin without us, about us.
It's just a ridiculous thing to say. You can't accept hundreds of billions of dollars in military aid and then say that we have no right to negotiate on your behalf. Because don't forget, we're still negotiating on your behalf. Even Donald Trump is sending military aid to Ukraine, right? Big picture, if you just look like materially, we are still supporting Ukraine. So when we go to the negotiating table, we're doing so on their behalf to negotiate a peace. We have decided we cannot fund this anymore. This is not a war worth fighting anymore, and so we have to end it. We still are your representative. Well, who are we there representing, if not you? We backed your side.
Yeah, my grandfather used to have a saying: "You got a rich man's taste with a poor man's pocket."
Right.
You know, yeah. Okay. You want to keep fighting Russia? How are you going to do that?
Yeah. Right.
How are you going to do that? What leverage do you have to force the United States to allow you to set any terms whatsoever? You're in no position to assert yourself in that way.
Right, and if you can't do it without us, then you have to accept that we are going to negotiate a peace on your behalf, just as you have fought this. We have funded your side of this war.
Right, and at this point, I think he's hoping that he can get the Europeans to do something, get the Europeans to intervene. There's no telling what's going on in his head. But if he had paid any attention to the history of how America treats the people it props up to fight its proxy wars, he would have seen this coming a long time ago.
Look, this fucking guy...
He's lucky if he doesn't wind up face down in a swamp somewhere.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, you got to be careful how you say this. He's very lucky to be in the position he's in at this point. Let's just say that. Yes.
Yeah. Now, you're seeing a lot of coverage of this from the American perspective, which we more or less agree with, people on the left, people from MAGA have long agreed that this was not a fight that we needed to be involved in or funding. The idea of essentially disentangling ourselves from Europe, that's something that is a cherished goal of the peace activist left and the Pat Buchanan isolationist right. That is something that the whole spectrum of non-deep state corporate media brainwashed people generally agree on. Why are we spending all this money? See, this is the problem. They're probably not going to cut the military funding. But that aside, why are we involved? Why do we have all of these military bases around the world? Trump has always essentially been saying he wanted to do this, that he wanted Europe basically to pay for its own defense. Right. Now, Chris Hedges had a great interview with Mark Lamont Hill. And one of the things he said was, what's happened here is the oligarchs are displacing the corporatists. And they don't really care about trade deals and the kind of stability that requires, because the oligarchs, they're not really in the business of making goods and services. They're rentier capitalists. They make their money off the cloud, off cloud rents, off what Varoufakis talks about in techno-feudalism. So they're not as concerned about maintaining these kinds of nice relationships with Europe. Now, from a European perspective, George Galloway had a very interesting monologue about this, in which one of the things he said was, yes, I've been saying my whole life Europe should maintain its own defense, and you know who should be part of that? Russia. Right. Russia wanted that 20 years ago. He proposed to Clinton, well, can I join NATO? And he said, no. Well, he said, well, kind of seems like NATO's about us then. Right? Why? Like, yeah, Russia's going to roll through Europe. I mean, it's just an absurd fantasy. So Bertrand, from a European perspective, this is kind of interesting, because I think Americans from across the political spectrum who are supportive of what you might broadly term an America First foreign policy, but really a let's get out of involvement in all these regions foreign policy, we're focused on that. But Bertrand, who's a pretty insightful commentator, gives a pretty good perspective on what this is, how this is playing for a European. So to sum up, the U.S. position is that Europe should stay out of negotiations that will fundamentally affect their security architecture, yet bear the primary responsibility and cost for the negotiations' outcome. And on top of that, it's quite clear from previous Trump declarations that the U.S. will be looking in the deal to take control of Ukraine's rare earth minerals as payment for the military aid it has provided, leaving presumably nothing to Europe. I've repeatedly warned that Europe was fast walking towards its own century of humiliation if it continued on its current path. I think it's now pretty damn clear that we're very much there already. If this goes through, this would possibly be unprecedented in European history. Never before, to my knowledge, has Europe's security architecture been redrawn without any European power at the table. Even during Europe's darkest moments, including the Mongol invasions, the Ottoman expansions, or the Yalta Conference, European powers always had some voice in negotiations affecting their future. To be clear, the primary culprit here isn't the U.S. or Trump. Any student of history knows that we live in a deeply unfair world where, as ancient Greek historian Thucydides wrote 2,500 years ago, quote, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." As such, the blame lies almost entirely on us Europeans, or more precisely, on our immensely incompetent leaders. And I want to stress this last point. They are literally incompetent on a millennia scale, given that they've managed to reduce Europe to a position that lacks any historical parallel, where it's expected to simply accept and implement whatever security arrangements others decide for it. Now, this jumps ahead some. So what could Europe do? After all, it is true that they have very little leverage, mainly due to the fact that they are protected by the very power that decided to put them on the menu instead of at the table. One idea could be to out-Trump Trump and to angle for a deal where the U.S., not Europe, ends up the loser. They could, for instance, finally tell the truth about what led to the war in the first place, namely NATO expansion pushed by the U.S., as well as the U.S.-led coup in Ukraine in 2014, and dissociate themselves from this, just the way Trump is very conveniently trying to dissociate himself from his own country's previous policies. They could make it clear that they were a deal that gives the U.S. access to any of Ukraine's resources and signal to Russia that they're open to a different kind of security architecture in Europe, one that doesn't rely on U.S. leadership or NATO. After all, if Trump can say he'll make deals with Putin, why couldn't Europe do the same? They could make it clear that they reject any deal that gives the U.S. access to any of Ukraine's resources and signal to Russia that they're open to a different kind of security architecture in Europe, one that doesn't rely on U.S. leadership or NATO. After all, if Trump can say he'll make deals with Putin, why couldn't Europe do the same? They could also reach out to China, which has already made it very clear that it opposed a deal in Ukraine without Europe at the table, and which is anyhow much better positioned to negotiate with Russia than Trump is. We could end up with a Europe freed from American tutelage for the first time since 1945, establishing a new multipolar equilibrium with China and Russia, turning Trump's attempt to exclude Europe into the very catalyst that finally enables European strategic autonomy. But this would require a level of strategic thinking that current European leaders have consistently shown themselves incapable of. Instead, I'm afraid they'll continue their current path of attempting to maintain the facade of transatlantic unity, even as they're being openly humiliated. So I think that's an important perspective that Americans don't have on this. At the same time, I would say what Bertrand, I mean, he's a very smart guy. He might be aware of this. It was beyond the scope of what he's talking about. Hey, that universal health care and those famous social programs you guys pay for, partly because we've been covering your defense since the end of World War II, those things are nice. We don't have any of those. To be fair, it's not only for that reason. It's because we're run by a kleptocracy of oligarchic scumbags. It's not entirely the fault of Europe. But you guys are able to spend money that you would not be able to spend on improving your own societies because you have relied on America to defend you. Now, again, to be fair, we did not do that out of the kindness of our hearts. We did it for control. We did it to keep our boots on your neck and to maintain you as vassal states and to make sure that you would never act independently of our foreign policy interests. So, yes, what you clearly see here that is not often, I think, made clear to Americans is that Europeans deep down hate us. You know, like they resent being dependent on the United States in that way. What perhaps they realize, perhaps they don't, perhaps they know this, perhaps they don't care really, or they think they can find a way around it. This architecture was put in place to protect American interests. Now, necessity is the mother of invention. Bertrand is saying here, well, I don't think that our leaders are skillful enough to do something like that. Well, they might if they have to. They might if they have to. The fact that what do you think they're going to talk about at this summit? What do you think they're talking about in Munich after these speeches? They hate us anyway. Now, if they're not getting anything out of the deal, they're very incentivized to form their own army, to form their own foreign policy. How does that affect American control over markets, access to markets, ability to set the terms of trade? This is what it's always been about. It's never been about altruism. Do the Trump people understand that and not care? Or more likely, I think, they're very arrogant and they just assume that the power of American wealth and military might will be enough to, through brute force, get its way. I don't know that that's true. But I think taking actions like this clearly are going to make the Europeans come together around some kind of agreement about handling their own security independent of the United States, which seems to be what we're telling them to do. We're not really leaving them a choice.
Well, certainly this administration isn't. I mean, I think it depends on how permanent this posture is, how permanent this alignment is, because, NATO has basically operated more or less in lockstep until now, where you have, one NATO member that pulls a lot of weight, us, basically dictating to them what has to happen. And if they don't like it, too bad. It depends on how permanent that is, right? How lasting that is. Things change and things can change. It remains to be seen if they will. I mean, it really is like this play here, this Ukraine war was now a decades-long operation by NATO in the West that has completely failed, just like every military endeavor of ours has completely failed for the last 80 years. And now they are thinking, well, if the United States is not a reliable partner anymore, how do we respond to that? Right. Now, in 4 years, are we looking at President Pete Buttigieg? Not literally, I don't think, but a type like that. At that point, maybe they don't find it to be necessary. I mean, I think you have to wait and see to see how permanent that'll be. Maybe literally. Dan Richmond thinks it's going to be President Pete Buttigieg in 4 years. That's his bet.
Oh, my God. You're not serious. He's not serious.
He thinks so. Yeah.
He does? Does he
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, that's
President
his bet.
Buttigieg? Really?
Yeah.
If I had to predict, my prediction would be that, yes, Europe, I don't know how effective it'll be. It may be deeply dysfunctional, but I think Europe is going to form its own security architecture and begin to negotiate independently of the United States. Like what Bertrand is saying they should do, they're not going to be ready to do that just yet, but I think they're going to start to move in that direction. And frankly, most of the world would rather deal with anyone but us. This is what I don't think the Trump people understand. Like, the more you force them to build their own independent alliances and diplomatic relationships, the happier they're going to be to just shut the United States out of anything. The more that you make that a possibility, and the more they find out they can do that, the more they're going to be, the whole world will be very happy to do that. It's not like the world is saying, gosh darn it, but I wish we could include the United States. Like, watch out what you wish for. You're very likely to get it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But, when they need a few $100 billion to wage this war, they lean on us quite a bit. Right.
Which the America First thing, they're saying, go get your fucking shy box.
Well,
we're not going to do that for you.
That's what I mean. It depends. It really depends on what the sort of long-term posture of the United States
if we
is
maintain
in this realm.
Yes.
Yep.
These guys strike me as arrogant enough and ideologically driven enough to just keep going that way.
All right. Let's take some more super chats and rumble rants before we close the stream. Q&A starts soon. DoDissidents.com/rumble. That takes you over to the Q&A where we'll be joined by Tusker in just a few minutes, but let's get some business taken care of here. Marvin Vargas, can you do Purple Gang Tour New York? Thank you, Marvin Vargas.
Purple Gang, that was Detroit, right? Weren't they Detroit? Were they Detroit or Kansas City?
I'm not sure.
That was a real gang. I think it was a Jewish gang, actually, the Purple Gang.
Baby Ethernet, this is battle between good and evil. Bullshit. Thank you, Baby Ethernet. Now that Trump is in office, we won't have to worry about the libtards making our trans. Thank you, Javier. Group OM for Gaza. Thank you for that, IMI. Thank you for that donation. Appreciate that very much.
It is Detroit, the Purple Gang.
Got it. All right. I saw the whole Bannon segment. Very paranoid new approach to imperialism, pseudo-economic garbage, and a weird presidential mysticism, not to mention total submission to Israel. Yeah, Bannon's foreign policy is more like Tulsi's, as I understand. Like, he's not really a neocon, but he definitely has a hard-on for Muslims. And, in terms of his economic package, he understands what right-wing populism is far better than Trump does. He made a video talking about how he shouldn't cut Medicaid too much because a lot of MAGA is on Medicaid. As for his approach to imperialism, I think paranoid is a good way to put it. I would agree with that. I think the idea that we have to secure the Western Hemisphere by, taking Greenland and Panama, that to me is just crazy. That's just insane. Like, we could just be less hostile to the world, and they'll be in turn less hostile to us. That seems to work for, like, pretty much every other country, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to go conquer Greenlands to secure the Western Hemisphere in order to have peace.
Yeah. Costa Rica literally does not have an army.
Right, yeah. Russ and Keaton, I think you guys would like Mattawan, the John Sayles film.
Oh, I saw that back in the
West
day,
Virginia. I saw it a while ago. David Strathairn. Yeah, it is a great cast. Strathairn, Cooper, Mary McDonald, Kevin Teague, James Earl Jones. Thank you, Dwayne Vogel. Appreciate that would be good for film night one time, actually.
That would be an excellent film night movie.
Didn't sound much anti-imperialist, anti-establishment to me. I send my heart out to Russ and Keaton in a non-Hitler way. Thank you. Appreciate that. Alex Dustley, appreciate that very much. What do we got over here on the Rumble side? Hillary Hinton, Keaton's in my previous rant. I wanted you to read the Jaws quote in Finkelstein's voice. It would have been spectacular. Smile, you sons of bitches. XX00. Monkey Rotary, what are you saying? Is the Palestinian people are fucked? It's a very, very horrible situation. It is. But that's what I think we're heading towards. I don't think you're going to get to a permanent ceasefire without more violence. Buttigieg would happily take the Shmuley Lube sponsorship. There you go. Thank you, Raven Les. Yeah. GDNPB, I always wait the first 100 days, but right now I have a very strong feeling I'm watching the most complex script I've ever seen. Thank you, GDNPB. A book club would be cool, but I don't have time for that. Not a book club. I just need a list of what you guys have recently read.
Techno-feudalism. Was that the last book I read? I feel like I read something after that.
Did you?
I'm on capitalist realism right now.
Yeah, what did I start reading like a couple weeks ago? Forget what it was. What was it?
Oh, I'm doing the Kash Patel book right now.
Oh, he's doing Kash Patel book right now. The last thing I read was the report on the Guantanamo Bay Migrant Center. It's pretty dry. Alex Dasleeb, can't help but think Europe wants some of the minerals Trump laid claim to. Vulture capitalists. I'm sure that's part of it as well. Baby Ethernet, goodbye Eurocentrism, hello multipolar world. That's right. Thank you for that. Adel Saeed, extremely disappointing to hear you guys say New Yorkers deserve Eric Adams. Do you really think the shit libs who voted for Adams are protesting ICE? Well, I said Democratic primary voters. That's what I said.
Yeah. I mean, it's a town full of shit libs, man. It just is. Yeah. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but
I mean, they have the outsized political influence. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, New Yorkers are generally pretty salt of the earth people. Like, you go into the outer boroughs. Like, that's why I think of when I think of New Yorkers, not the cosmopolitan Manhattanites.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm from.
But unfortunately, it's those Manhattanite shit libs who really control who the mayor is because they're the most active Democratic voters and they vote in these primaries.
They fund the primaries.
Yeah, and they fucking vote for just one piece of shit after another, you know? And you're right. I mean, it is not fair to the whole city of New York because a lot of New Yorkers are the kind of salt of the earth outer borough, you know, real people, as we say. But the people who make the political decisions at the voter level in that city, they deserve Eric Adams. All the libs deserve Eric Adams. They deserve a piece of shit, a two-faced piece of shit, you know, right-wing Democrat who's going to sell them out to Trump. Yes. Everybody who voted for Dan Goldman in the primary, that's what I'll say, deserves Eric Adams. And those are the people who control politics in New York City.
All I'm going to say, Adil, is if you had canvassed for Bernie in Manhattan, you'd probably feel the same way that I do.
Yep.
That's where I got the lib voice from, because I was out campaigning for Bernie on the Upper West Side, and I swear to God, it was like 6 old ladies bum rushed me. You got to vote for Hillary. She's the only one who can win. She's the only one who can win. Fucking horrible, man.
Now
it was like the scene where the old men attack him in Clockwork Orange.
I canvassed for Bernie in Ridgewood, in Maspeth, in some of the outer borough areas where I got great responses from people. But guess what? To your point, Adil, or to my point, I guess, in response to your point, they were all independents who couldn't vote for him because they weren't registered Democrats. So I'm saying, like, they're not the ones who make the decisions in New York City politics. Like, the independents, you know, are shut out of it. You got to be a card-carrying Democrat who's hyper invested in the party, and they're the ones who pick people like Eric Adams, Bill de Blasio, who Bill de Blasio just fell ass backwards into being mayor. They were going to pick Weiner.
Right.
They were going to
pick Weiner.
They were going to pick Weiner. But he had a scandal come out.
They love a good Weiner in this town.
Right, exactly. Right. They were going to pick Anthony Weiner. Baby Ethan. And they're going to pick Andrew Cuomo this time. That's my guess. The U.S. is about to dine and dash. Pull out 2025.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
That's a good way to put it.
Europe could start by rebuilding a certain undersea pipeline. Yes, and being honest about who ended it. There you go. That's a good idea, David Santucci. I appreciate that. We all know you're reading Xi Jinping, Governance of China, Russ. Thank you. China Shill, appreciate that very much. All right, Jake, are you ready to take us to Rumble Land? Because that's where we are going. All right, so we're going to say goodbye to Russell, who is going to catch an early flight tomorrow, so he will catch an early bedtime tonight. Tusker, if you're out there, there you are. You are logged in and ready to go.
I will hang out for my intermission.
Oh,
I did a special intermission.
Cool.
It's got a fun little button at the end.
All right. Awesome. Well, folks, thanks very much for being here. Go to dudissidents.com/rumble if you want to stick around for the Q&A. That takes you right to this stream. Tusker's going to join me to take your calls, and the party will continue. So we will see Russell on Thursday again. Craig Pasta-Jardula is going to be joining me in the co-host chair on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So Russ will be back here on Thursday with Shama Sawant.
666.
We do almost 666, actually. Yes, we do. Let's do that. Let's make sure we get that taken care of.
I thought you were going to hit it.
All right. Here it is. I got it. So, yes, I'll be co-hosting with Craig Pasta-Jardula on Tuesday, and then Russ will be back here on Thursday with Shama Sawant in advance of Worker Strike Back. Then we got the Super Stream on Saturday. So a busy week coming up this week. If you would like to join us for the Q&A, that's the link, dudissidents.com/rumble. Thanks to Jake for being here with us tonight. Appreciate you as always, Jake. And we will see you guys in 5 minutes over there for the Q&A. YouTubers, if you're not joining us for the Q&A, smash that like button on the way out. Smash that subscribe button on the way out. Everybody else, we will see you in 5 minutes over on the other side. Until then, until whenever we see you again, thanks for tonight. Be safe and be well.
Courage!
Please clap.